Her birth caused her mother's death, yet her father still treasured her like a jewel. He even made her emperor at just 1 year old. On the day Mabel was born, the Holy Empire sent down a divine prophecy that a seed to save the world would be planted at the edge of the East. So she was not only adored by her family, but even worshipped by the people of her country. However, in her previous life, she lived in misery. Her father, with a criminal record, spent his days drinking and gambling. Her helpless mother abandoned her. Year after year, her debt-ridden father constantly harassed her, even stealing the tuition she had saved from her hard work. And finally, he pushed her off a high building. Just as she calmly accepted her fate, a very gentle voice reached her ears. "My adorable little one, you've already grown a bit in just a few days." She guessed that she had been reincarnated, and through the conversations of those around her, she confirmed that she had become a princess of a country. Although being born with a silver spoon was a good thing, her birth had caused her birth mother to die from weakness, so she naturally assumed that her father would be cold and resentful toward her. But even so, Mabel didn't mind. After all, her experience with family in her previous life was so tragic. So in this life, she no longer hoped to receive love. But what she didn't expect was that her emperor father looked at her with eyes full of adoration and would be delighted just from making eye contact with her by chance. He would even reach out to gently stroke her head, praising her for being so smart, for recognizing her father at such a young age. But Mabel wasn't moved at all, because in the past, she had also been treated like a rare treasure. But later, everything changed, so she believed that nothing lasted forever. However, she didn't know how firmly she was loved by her father now. It turned out that there were 3 powerful countries on this continent. First, the current Ermino Empire. Second, the enemy country of the Devlin Empire. And finally, the neutral Holy Abelardo Empire. In this place where everyone believed in deities, the Holy Empire was regarded as the representative of the gods, holding an extremely high status. Now they viewed Mabel as the seed mentioned in the prophecy. Every day they sent letters requesting to take her to the Holy Empire. Emperor Ace rejected them time and time again despite the pressure. But this couldn't be a long-term solution, because they knew that Mabel had an older brother, Oscar, who would inherit the throne, so they had even more reason to take the princess away. Just as the emperor was contemplating how to respond, Crown Prince Oscar rushed in and questioned, "When will you finally agree?" Surprisingly, Oscar was talking about visiting his sister Mabel. He had been waiting for this day for a whole month. Not only could he barely sleep from excitement the night before, but he had even ended his sword training early today. The emperor originally planned to refuse, but seeing the little boy looking so disappointed, he decided to let the siblings meet. After all, his daughter was still too young to remember him. Soon after, they arrived at the princess's room. Mabel, who had just fallen asleep, was awakened. She pouted, very unhappy, thinking, "This person again, I should have pretended to be asleep." At that moment, a head suddenly peered over her bed. Looking at this unfamiliar face, she made a deduction, confirming that this boy was the big brother mentioned by her nurse. Mabel was annoyed and wanted to drive them out. But as a newborn baby who was only a month old, she could only make yee-ya-ya sounds. Oscar saw this and became very excited, saying Mabel must be calling him brother. The emperor, not to be outdone, said she was clearly calling Papa. Mabel was utterly speechless and could only stare at the wet nurse for help. But the wet nurse thought she was hungry. To quickly get rid of the 2 men, she desperately drank her milk. But this backfired, making the emperor even happier. He wanted to personally feed his daughter. No matter how much she struggled, it was useless. So she had no choice but to close her eyes and gulp down the milk. And inevitably, she threw up all over the emperor. Everyone panicked. After all, the emperor used to be quite ruthless. But surprisingly, he wasn't angry at all, instead joking, "Our Mabel spit up his holy water." Then he gently wiped the milk from his daughter's mouth. This strange scene worried Mabel. She hoped the crown prince would say something to the emperor, but Oscar was just as excited, wanting to hold his sister. Mabel was completely speechless. She could only pray that if there really were gods, please stop these 2 from hovering around her. But after a few days, she firmly believed there were no gods in this world, just to cultivate Mabel's artistic sensibilities. They turned the imperial family heirlooms into decorations. However, to Mabel, this all seemed extremely abnormal. She now only wanted to grow up quickly and leave this place as soon as possible. After days of effort, she could already skillfully control her fingers to grasp things. The next step was to lift her neck before rolling over, but no matter how hard she tried, she failed. Just as she was feeling frustrated, her brother Oscar also snuck in, wanting to be close to his sister, but he was stopped by the wet nurse because he was dirty all over. So he had to go to the bathroom first to take a bath. However, at this time, the wet nurse noticed that Mabel was sweating a lot. Thinking she had a cold, she hurriedly sent someone to call a doctor. Oscar, who had finished his bath, saw this scene and panicked as well. He quickly ran to his sister's side, begging her to stay strong. Mabel was almost speechless. It was so awkward that no one could understand her. Shortly after, the emperor rushed in, gently caressing his daughter's cheek, as if handling a fragile piece of porcelain. After the doctor's examination, he confirmed that Mabel was very healthy. She was probably sweating because she felt hot. Hearing this, the emperor finally breathed a sigh of relief and hugged his daughter tightly. Mabel also felt warmth, which was quite rare for her. From that day on, Mabel didn't dare to exercise randomly anymore. After all, The slightest issue would bring unnecessary trouble, and her peaceful life faced changes once again. Today was her first day going out for a walk. The wet nurse and servants had been preparing for days. Everything from head to toe was carefully thought out. Even the baby carriage was made from a national treasure broken by the emperor. Thinking about this, Mabel felt it was quite troublesome. On the day of the little princess's first outing, surprisingly, her curious eyes lit up, because she didn't expect the palace to be more magnificent than she had imagined. But without magic to maintain a constant temperature outside, she started trembling from the cold. When everyone noticed, they all took off their coats and covered her to prevent her from catching a cold. Just then, the emperor suddenly appeared, picking up Mabel in one motion, hoping she would have a good time, then covering her with his own coat. Everyone was shocked. The emperor's clothes were made from precious magical fabric, yet he casually gave it to the little princess, showing how important she was to him. Soon the group arrived at the forest in the northern part of the imperial city. Seeing such a blue sky, she couldn't help but sigh. Though her previous life had only passed not long ago, it felt like something from the distant past. Her melancholic expression looked like drowsiness to Oscar, so Oscar held her tightly in his arms, lulling her to sleep like a precious treasure. This confused Mabel. Why was he so good to her? Was it just because he was her brother in name? But Mabel couldn't treat him and the emperor as family. She always felt somewhat embarrassed. At that moment, the servant Xavier shouted that there was a divine beast. Everyone except Oscar was very curious. The wet nurse took Mabel, planning to stay here, letting Oscar go with them to take a look. Now Mabel was anxious. In her previous world, there were no so-called divine beasts. So she was very curious and wanted to see it too, but no one could understand what she was saying. Seeing that they were about to leave, she shouted loudly, "Kitty!" Everyone was shocked. A 2-month-old baby speaking was simply genius. But only Oscar looked disappointed, wondering why his sister's first word was kitty and not brother. Although Mabel thought there was nothing to be upset about, she still instinctively wanted to comfort him. For the first time, she actively reached out for a hug. Thankfully, this indeed made Oscar happy again. Afterward, everyone entered the forest together to look for the divine beast. But it was unusually quiet here, not seeming like there were any creatures. Just as they were about to leave, Mabel noticed a flash of light. Oscar, carrying Mabel, slowly walked toward the light. The divine beast glowed with a golden light, like an adorable little cat. Just as the divine beast was approaching, Mabel suddenly sneezed, startling the divine beast, making it bristle and run away. And so, the first walking tour came to a perfect end. However, on their way back to the palace, they encountered Duchess Donovan, the birth mother of the crown prince, with sharp green eyes, giving people a feeling of being unapproachable. Even the thick-skinned Oscar was very afraid. This situation made Mabel instinctively raise her guard. After all, she was the child of the Duchess's ex-husband and his next wife. Surely she would be seen as a thorn in her side. In reality, the Duchess didn't make any moves, but they still only breathed a sigh of relief after moving far away. At that moment, a commotion came from not far away. Everyone showed very nervous and uneasy expressions. A group of knights holding long swords surrounded a boy wearing a black cloak. The scene was chaotic. Obviously, the knights were no match for the boy. Just then, their eyes met. The next second, the boy suddenly lost consciousness and collapsed. It turned out the boy's identity was not simple. He was the strongest weapon of the enemy Devlin Empire, known as the Devil of Devlin. In a recent battle, he suddenly froze in place and was captured. And just now, on the way to the underground prison, he suddenly lost control, almost causing a disaster. The assistant was very anxious. If the emperor knew about this incident, it would likely incur his fury. But surprisingly, when the emperor heard that the princess was safe and sound, he didn't have much of a reaction. But when he learned that Mabel had called out Kitty to the divine beast for the first time, he violently crushed the expensive teacup in his hand. Then, abandoning a pile of urgent official business, he ran to Mabel's chamber and started unreasonably troubling the servants. Mabel knew his intentions, so to help the wet nurse out of her predicament, she shouted Kitty again. Hearing his daughter speak for the first time, the emperor was so happy his eyes shone, but at the same time he felt somewhat disappointed that she didn't call him Papa. And then he made a bold decision, granting the northern imperial forest where the divine beast resided to the 2-month-old infant. Yet the emperor was still not satisfied, thinking that the landscape design there wasn't as good as the royal villa. So he had the assistant record that both Fawn's castle and the northern forest were to be granted to the princess. Mabel was completely speechless, but no longer made futile resistance, because the emperor before her was just a crazy daughter fanatic. Soon another month passed. Today, priests from the Holy Empire came to visit. Although the emperor was extremely dissatisfied in his heart, he couldn't openly show hostility. After all, they were called representatives of the gods, considered honored guests wherever they went. I hear you've come to study ancient divine language. I hope you research it well before you leave. The implication was for them not to do anything unnecessary and to leave quickly. Unexpectedly, the priests not only ignored his suggestion, but even actively brought up Mabel, and added the surname Winter under the guidance of the prophecy. The emperor very seriously stated that he did not acknowledge the prophecy. Just based on an ambiguous prophecy, you want me to send such a young and weak child to the Holy Empire? It's simply preposterous. The priest sneered. taking out the late emperor's pendant from his bosom. It turned out that the late emperor had received help from the Holy Empire to successfully ascend to the throne, so he left the pendant as a token. So you want me to repay the debt left by the late emperor with my child? How can I accept this? Seeing the situation, the priest didn't press further, only proposing to pay respects to the princess. At this point, the emperor couldn't refuse again, but he still added conditions. You must keep a distance of 20 meters from Mabel, and magic and divine power are strictly prohibited. If you dare to pose any threat to Mabel, you will be executed on the spot. The priests felt the emperor's love for the princess for the first time and were all ashamed. Meanwhile, Mabel was preparing to listen to Oscar tell a story. She thought it would be some fairy tale, but as soon as he started, it was mind-boggling. On the flaws of Bordosian philosophy as proposed by Agol, he was reading with great interest. But Mabel, dissatisfied, launched a pacifier attack at him. Only then did Oscar realize his sister didn't like it. Next time, I'll bring a more interesting book. Just then, there was a commotion at the door. The emperor brought the priests in. So this is the princess. The little princess felt nauseous upon first seeing the priests of the Holy Empire. And the closer the priests came, the stronger her reaction became. Fortunately, the emperor stepped in to stop them. Mabel is shy. Let's end it here for today. The priests didn't push further, but before leaving they said, recently the Devlin Empire's movements have been unusual, even approaching the Holy Empire. If they're looking for the devil of the Devlin Empire, it could potentially endanger the Ermino Empire. Please be vigilant. After saying this, he looked at Mabel, then turned and left. As the priest disappeared, the uneasy feeling in Mabel's heart also instantly dispersed. Even though there was no hostility in their eyes, it still felt strange. That night, Mabel deliberately pretended to sleep to trick the wet nurse away, then began secretly practicing rolling over. But for a 3-month-old baby, this was still too difficult. She wanted to learn to walk soon, because her father and brother's loving care made her uncomfortable every day. Although it felt cruel, she still decided to grow up quickly and leave this place. Just then, the sound of footsteps came from not far away. It was the priest from earlier. You're awake? I've come to take you, Your Highness. Mabel didn't know what the man intended, but sneaking around late at night was certainly not good. So all she could do was cry loudly for help, seeing the man in a panic. Mabel cried even more forcefully. Immediately, there was a banging sound at the door. No time left, I need to take you away quickly. Just as the priest was about to reach for her, Mabel, in her anxiety, suddenly rolled over. And at that moment, the emperor broke down the door. What did you do to my daughter? Nothing. I didn't touch a single hair on Her Highness. Then why is she lying face down? Her Highness rolled over by herself, I swear in the name of the god. Mabel heard the sound of the emperor drawing his sword, fearing he might do something drastic. So she wanted to roll over again to prove the priest was telling the truth, but she tried hard and still couldn't do it. Unexpectedly, the emperor gritted his teeth and said, "It's all because of you. I miss seeing Mabel roll over for the first time." So, that was the issue. After everything was settled, the emperor muttered to himself, "I should gouge out that fellow's eyeballs." This made the entire Night Order tremble, although it was normal for the emperor to get angry. Creating diplomatic friction with the Holy Empire would be troublesome. The captain, accepting the risk of death, advised, "Your Majesty, I don't think this incident warrants using torture on the criminal. You say it's not necessary?" Mabel was crying. That fellow scared her to tears as soon as he approached. "I want to tear him into 1,000 pieces." The knight inwardly cheered, "Long live the princess. Since you're so against it, I'll spare his life. Let's see the Holy Empire's reaction first." But Mabel needs a personal guard. Who volunteers? At first glance, this looked like a good opportunity to avoid training. But in reality, it was a job where one could easily lose their life. So everyone lowered their heads. Just as the emperor was about to get angry, a man walked in. "I'm willing to be Her Highness's guard." It was the former empress's brother, and the emperor approved. The next day, they met for the first time. The man suddenly appeared with a grin, startling Mabel. She even spat out her pacifier. "Did I scare the little princess? Oh my, even when scared she's so cute." Mabel found it strange and squirmed on the bed. The man was embarrassed. "I hope I won't be disliked the first time we meet." At that moment, the wet nurse entered and greeted the man. "Sir Donovan, you're here early." Mabel was shocked to hear this. Isn't this the surname of the former empress's family? The man chatted smoothly with the wet nurse. "You're even more beautiful than before. Thinking about seeing you every day from now on makes me incredibly happy. Haha, you're still as sweet-tongued as ever. With Swordsmaster Sir Donovan as the princess's guard, I can rest assured." Mabel finally understood the situation. But why would the emperor so readily entrust her to someone from the former empress's family? He acted familiar at first meeting and flirted freely with the wet nurse, clearly a playboy. "Stay away from the wet nurse." The man clearly sensed that Mabel didn't like him, but the wet nurse thought the little princess was wary of strangers after nearly being abducted last night. Mabel knew the wet nurse was blaming herself again, so she actively asked for a hug to comfort her. "Look, your lordship, Her Highness is both kind and well-behaved." Mabel cooperated by smiling at the man, instantly winning him over. "I'm certain this isn't the princess. This is clearly an angel descended from heaven. The prophecy is indeed true." Mabel was nearly driven mad. Another abnormal one? How could such a brainless person be her guardian knight? The emperor must really hate me. After 3 months, she started to worry about her future. Just then, Oscar sneakily came. The moment he saw the man, his smile immediately disappeared. Uncle. Oscar, why are you here? Isn't it time for your imperial studies? I finished all the homework you left before coming. Is just finishing homework enough? Who would still see you as the Empire's heir? You're such a disappointment. Go back to training right away. Seeing Oscar hanging his head and about to leave, Mabel couldn't stand it anymore. She pretended to be on the verge of tears and was about to lunge toward Oscar. She knew that only when he was with her did Oscar have time to breathe. So she angrily glared at the man and shouted, "Kitty!" The wet nurse quickly jumped in to explain, "The princess is somewhat shy with strangers, so please just guard outside the bedroom for now. And the princess is very fond of the crown prince, which is why he visits every day." With no other choice, the man let Oscar play well with the princess and turned to leave dejectedly. As soon as he left, he ran into his elder sister, Duchess Donovan. "I heard you volunteered to be the princess's guard. So how does it feel after seeing her in person?" The man expressed that in all his life he had never seen such an adorable child, as cute as an angel. The Duchess had a meaningful expression, making her brother unable to guess her thoughts. "Sister, do you dislike the princess?" Because in his view, his sister didn't even like her own child. She had been extremely strict with Oscar since he was little, and even told him, as Oscar's teacher, not to be soft-hearted. So Oscar's once warm and kind uncle suddenly became very strict. Lisandro was somewhat concerned that his sister might harm the little princess in the future, but that was a matter for later. The urgent task now was to find a way to make the little princess not dislike him. Summer soon arrived. In her monotonous life, Mabel had secretly learned to crawl. Now she was starting to eat some solid food, and very much looking forward to growing up quickly, to try what delicacies tasted like. After all, in her previous life, she was so poor she could barely afford to eat. During these days, Lisandro still peeked in from outside the door every day. For Oscar's happiness, Mabel always showed an angry face toward him, although the man seemed somewhat pitiful. For Oscar's sake, she couldn't soften her heart. She lay on the bed bored. When the wet nurse noticed, she decided to take her for a walk by the lake. "If we go to the northern forest, we might see the cat you like." Mabel seriously tried to explain in baby language that she wasn't that obsessed with the divine beast. But the wet nurse became even more convinced that Mabel liked it. She no longer made futile resistance anyway. There was no way to clear up the misunderstanding before she could speak. The group went outside. The weather was already very hot. This was something she couldn't feel in the temperature-controlled chamber. The wet nurse, afraid she would get sunburned, hurriedly set up an umbrella. Suddenly, she smelled the fragrance of flowers nearby. She loved it immensely. After all, she had never received flowers in her previous life. Even at graduation, she could only watch others taking photos with their parents while holding bouquets. Just thinking about her previous experiences made her very sad. At that moment, Xavier picked her up, planning to go look for the divine beast. The two walked deep into the forest, indeed finding the kitty. Although she had seen it once before, the golden glowing fur still amazed her. After playing with the kitty for a while, Mabel was sweating profusely, so Xavier decided to take her back to the lake. "Come, let's say goodbye to Kitty." Mabel felt extremely awkward, but seeing Xavier's smiling face, she could only cooperate and go along with it. Oh wow, so good. The people around her would always praise her greatly for these little things, making Mabel uncomfortable. As they were walking away, she vaguely heard the divine beast say, "You must come again." But obviously no one else heard it, so she thought it was just her imagination and didn't take it seriously. Then the mischievous Mabel deliberately pointed everywhere, making Xavier run around the lake. This meant Lisandro also had to turn in circles while secretly protecting her from afar. Finally, Xavier collapsed from exhaustion. "Your Highness, can we rest for a while?" Taking advantage of not being noticed, Mabel began secretly practicing crawling. As she crawled farther and farther, she suddenly saw a black belt protruding from the bushes. The curious child peered in. It was the Devil of Devlin. She was very puzzled why the boy would appear here. Had he escaped from prison? Seeing his bloodied face, Mabel was concerned, thinking it terrible that the Empire would torture a child. Mabel originally wanted to help wipe the blood clean, but with her current body, she could at most crawl a few steps, not even able to speak. Suddenly, the wet nurse noticed she had crawled away and hurriedly called Xavier to bring her back. Mabel panicked, because the boy must not be discovered, so she picked up leaves from the ground to hide him. But the boy suddenly opened his eyes. As their eyes met, Mabel felt like she was being drawn into the boy's red eyes. Seeing Xavier getting closer, Mabel hurriedly left, following Xavier back. This was the only thing she could do, hoping the boy would be safe. Actually, the boy had been conscious all along. What happened before seemed like a dream, a very long dream. In the dream, he was like a walking corpse, completely unable to control himself, only killing cruelly without distinguishing friend from foe. When he regained consciousness, he was imprisoned in the dungeon. So he used his magical power to break the seal, knocked out the guards, and escaped. All along, he had been in a dazed state, and today was the first time he experienced this feeling of clarity, so he decided to lie there and rest for a moment. His body would heal itself soon. When Mabel first appeared, he didn't open his eyes and thought it was just a little rabbit. Posing no threat, it would probably leave on its own. But after a long time passed, just as he was about to drive Mabel away, leaf after leaf fell on his face. What he saw were those blue eyes, just like when they met from afar last time. He became clear-minded again. Even the restrictions within his body loosened. What identity could this child have to possess such powerful magic? That night after returning, Mabel developed a high fever, perhaps due to encountering heavy rain on the way back. But as soon as she came back, the servants immediately helped Mabel take a bath and change her clothes. She thought their reaction was too exaggerated. Unexpectedly, she really caught a cold in the middle of summer. This made everyone in the palace extremely nervous, especially the emperor, who was very distressed, feeling that such a small child must be suffering greatly even from just a cold. If only he could suffer in her place. Although the palace doctors said she would recover quickly after taking fever medication, the emperor remained very worried. Just then, the assistant burst in, shouting, "Your Majesty, something terrible has happened. I must report to you." The emperor was on the verge of exploding. "How dare you disturb Mabel's rest so loudly?" Although the assistant sensed trouble, the matter was too important not to report immediately. "The Devil of Devlin has escaped." Originally, the magic seal was impossible to break, but the devil stunned the guards and fled. Following the blood trail, we tracked him to the northern forest. Then he disappeared. Hearing this, the emperor remembered that Mabel had been walking there today, and was extremely relieved his daughter hadn't encountered the devil. But what he didn't know was that it was Mabel who helped cover for the boy. So he wasn't discovered. Immediately seal the city gates. No one enters or leaves without permission. Also, assign 20 times the normal guard force to Mabel's palace, and search with the northern forest, where the trail disappeared, as the center. After arranging everything, the emperor had everyone leave the room. He stayed by Mabel's side. Actually, he knew that children inevitably encounter such situations while growing up, but still felt very frustrated. Even as the ruler of the largest country on the continent, he still couldn't protect the most important person. He recalled his wife Sienna, begging to save the child during her difficult labor. He had regretted it many times these days, but it was also because of this, that he wanted to protect Mabel even more, to ensure the child grew up safely. Yet today made him feel very powerless, even considering giving up. Just then, Mabel's little hand accidentally touched him, bringing him back to his senses, making him pull himself together. "I am Papa, so I will definitely protect you well." At this moment, the feverish Mabel hazily returned to her previous life. Sick, she struggled to find expired medicine at home. With not even water available, she had to swallow it painfully. She couldn't understand why she had no parents to care for her. Why did others look at her with such pity? Yet no one could answer. In her haze, she heard the emperor's voice, felt someone helping her reduce the fever physically, feeding her medicine, gently stroking her. Mabel took it all as a dream because she was Gyeol Yoon, a girl without father. But experiencing warmth for the first time, she still craved this feeling, only hoping this dream could last a little longer. A little longer. The next day, Mabel woke up from her sleep. With a severe cold, she should have been burning with fever and dizzy. But now she felt refreshed, not uncomfortable at all. However, when she turned over, she discovered the emperor sitting nearby, asleep. She was very confused about why the emperor would be here at this time. The next moment, he smiled and stroked her forehead, and wiped her sweat, seeing the emperor's exhausted appearance. Mabel finally realized that last night the emperor had been taking care of her. It wasn't a dream, but something that really happened. Understanding the truth, Mabel burst into tears. The emperor thought she was uncomfortable and gently picked her up, comforting her softly. Mabel couldn't believe she deserved to be loved like this, and believed that human hearts change easily, so she had a suspicious attitude toward everything before her. After this, the emperor became overly protective of her. Wind chimes might fall so they couldn't be hung. Toys might cause injuries so they couldn't be played with. Even stuffed toys were confiscated. Thanks to the emperor, Mabel had become even more bored than before. Fortunately, Oscar came. Mabel immediately maintained a vigilant attitude toward Lysandro, constantly attacking him with her limited vocabulary. Oscar laughed, and patiently explained that she didn't need to dislike her uncle so much. "He used to play with me often. It was only after becoming a sword instructor that he suddenly became strict. He's not a bad person." Mabel angrily pushed Oscar. She had driven Lysandro away for his sake, yet he was defending Lysandro. Oscar sensed his sister's dissatisfaction, so he quickly changed the subject, asking someone to bring in today's homework. The bored Mabel suddenly became interested and moved closer to casually flip through it. But she found she couldn't understand it at all. She could barely look at the illustrations. Perhaps learning about the continental map wouldn't be bad. So she pointed at various countries and asked Oscar where they were. Unexpectedly, Oscar was a genius. He had memorized the map perfectly. However, when she pointed to a nearby country with territory second only to the Empire, Oscar instantly changed his demeanor. So this was the Devlin Empire. The two countries didn't have good relations. The Devlin Empire not only coveted their lands but had also launched many wars. Recently, a small-scale incident occurred at the border. Our forces were completely wiped out, and more terrifying still, the enemy only had one person. Mabel was listening with fascination, when Oscar suddenly mocked himself. "Why am I telling you this? You can't understand anyway." Mabel, still unable to speak, truly had grievances she couldn't express. However, Oscar didn't notice at all. He just played childish games with Mabel, smiling. Soon Mabel welcomed her 8th month in this world, because Mabel was always motionless. The wet nurse was very worried, and even invited a doctor for a thorough examination, but the conclusion was that she was very healthy, with no problems. Yet, at night, Mabel would begin her own exercise plan. Today she planned to attempt standing. She gripped the rails tightly, thinking about the feeling of walking in her previous life while using all her strength. After much effort, she really stood up, but now wasn't the time to truly celebrate. Take a step. Take the first step of being reborn as a human. However, what she didn't know was that her underground work was about to be discovered. Meanwhile, the emperor had arrived in the corridor outside the palace, planning to leave after seeing his daughter sleeping peacefully. When he pushed open the door, he froze completely. Even the lamp in his hand fell to the ground. Mabel panicked. How could she explain a child who could at most crawl suddenly walking while holding onto rails? Just as she was brainstorming, the emperor excitedly shouted, "Amazing! My daughter is simply a genius. This is truly remarkable." After saying this, he flew over to his daughter, kissing her frantically like a bird pecking. Mabel's forehead was numb from all the kisses. "To commemorate your success in learning to walk, I must give you a gift. I've decided to give you the Principality of Vistante, a famously fertile land and a holiday resort." Mabel was completely shocked. Wait, what did he say? A principality? The next day at the meeting, the ministers reported to the emperor about the Devlin escaping back to the border, and all of our people being defeated. They expected to face thunderous anger. Unexpectedly, the emperor wasn't angry at all, but appeared to be in an extremely good mood. Without thinking, everyone knew it was because of the little princess. "Your Majesty, what happy event has occurred? You seem to be in a very good mood." Mentioning this, the emperor was very proud. "Mabel can walk now, she's truly a genius. So I've decided to bestow the Principality of Vistante upon her." Everyone present was extremely shocked. That was a reward the emperor received when he was still the crown prince. It was a politically, geographically, and diplomatically strategic location. In a few months, it would be the little princess's first birthday. They couldn't imagine how grandly the first year would be celebrated. What was this never-before-seen princess really like? After the meeting ended, the emperor put down the documents that needed to be handled and eagerly walked towards his daughter's room, but was stopped by Marquis Gardenia in the next moment. "Your Majesty, can you let me see Princess now?" This made the emperor very unhappy because since Mabel was just born, he had been clamoring for 3 months, finally quieted down, and now he was at it again. 8 months have passed, can you let me see her now? Mabel is still too young. But you just said she can walk. Hearing this, the emperor really wanted to slap himself for being so careless earlier. And the princess is the heir to the Gardenia family, isn't she? This was truly a headache, one after another, all wanting to snatch away his precious daughter. Absolutely not. But constantly refusing without reason wasn't a solution either. Perhaps meeting once could avoid a lot of trouble. "I will set a specific date for your visit." Only then did the Marquise leave, satisfied. Just seeing Gardenia's face reminded the emperor of how he was repeatedly obstructed when trying to marry Sienna in the past, in every way an unlikable old man. Time quickly passed a week, and the attendants tirelessly helped Mabel practice walking. They took turns one after another, until they were all exhausted on the ground. Suddenly, the wet nurse's scolding voice came from behind. Mabel knew that something important must have happened for the wet nurse to scold them about their appearance. She turned her head and saw an old man she had never seen before behind the wet nurse. The old man had a kind and gentle face. Introducing himself to Mabel with a full smile, "I am your highness's grandfather." Mabel was surprised and couldn't help but murmur, "Graffa?" This brought Marquis Gardenia to tears on the spot. How touching. Meanwhile, the emperor was gritting his teeth, staring outside the door, as if he would rush out the next second. How could the assistant not understand the emperor's thoughts? It would be better to go take a look, and then come back to handle affairs. "If you're worried, why don't you go check?" "No, that would make me look too much like a daughter-obsessed father." In fact, everyone thought so. But the assistant didn't dare say it. He could only tell white lies to trick the emperor into going. But unexpectedly, the emperor hadn't planned to handle state affairs at all. He directly slipped away and quickly left the room. At this moment, the Marquis had just stopped his tears and began to accuse the emperor of cruelty. According to the Marquis, Sienna was the most beautiful and popular person in the empire, and the current emperor was capricious and willful during his time as crown prince, treating human lives as worthless. He was thrown onto the battlefield by the former emperor to fend for himself, becoming an emperor with an extremely bad reputation. Later, not only did he propose to Sienna immediately after divorcing, but he also didn't allow him to meet his granddaughter. It was outrageous. Hearing these words, Mabel couldn't help but be moved. Although she didn't see the Marquis as her grandfather, she was his only relative in this world. So she comforted him by gently patting his hand and calling him Graffa. Just then, the emperor entered. The suffocating tension between father-in-law and son-in-law erupted instantly. Whoever gets involved is unfortunate. Caught in the middle, Mabel found it very difficult. So she asked the wet nurse for help, wanting to escape. Unexpectedly, she grabbed the nearby railing and jumped down. The scene suddenly became completely silent. Mabel suddenly realized that they were shocked by her agile movements. However, the next moment, the two men started arguing again, engaging in a meaningless confrontation. Looking at the two pairs of hands reaching towards her, Mabel was under great pressure. Choosing either would cause big trouble, so she decided to cry loudly and should be able to avoid it. Just as she was trying to work up emotions, Oscar stormed in, and Mabel knew a better solution had arrived. So she quickly reached out her hands to Oscar for help. A crisis was finally resolved. Meanwhile, the priest who had been reluctantly released and permanently banned from entering the Ermino Empire had returned to the Holy Empire. He thought he would be severely punished for failing the mission to bring back the seed of God. Unexpectedly, the Holy Emperor hadn't had any expectations for him. Sending him was just a test, to see if the Ermino Empire was protecting the seed of God well. And a sinister plan was born at this moment. Several weeks passed, and on this day, the usually silent Mabel suddenly started howling. The very worried wet nurse took a look and laughed. This shocked Mabel greatly. The wet nurse was the one she trusted most. She was in such pain, and the wet nurse could still laugh. How disappointing. Suddenly, the wet nurse said, "Her Highness is crying because her teeth hurt. Our little princess is growing teeth." Mabel was extremely happy. Growing teeth meant she would be able to speak soon. This news will surely reach His Majesty's ears quickly, so we need to prepare for his visit. Mabel thought it wasn't possible. The next moment, the Emperor made a dazzling appearance. "My precious daughter is finally growing teeth. This is a huge celebration. Let me think about what gift to give you this time." To prevent the Emperor from saying something else outrageous, Mabel could only suggest she wanted simple cookies, so she kept repeating, "Gimme cookie." The Emperor thought for 0.1 seconds, and happily declared he would send the capital's head chef here. Mabel was truly furious, screaming internally, "I want cookies, not chef." Not long after, the Emperor received a letter from the Holy Empire saying that for Mabel's first birthday, the Holy Emperor would personally attend to offer congratulations. The Emperor angrily tore the letter to pieces, because this was a declaration of war from the Holy Empire. He would never allow anyone to harm his daughter. At this moment, he already had an idea, so he wrote a reply, "Welcome, Holy Emperor. There are 2 months until the banquet. I am already looking forward to that day." The day finally arrived. The little princess finally welcomed her first birthday celebration. Today was the first time she saw her own appearance, and she was completely surprised. She never expected to look so cute in this life. She could understand why they always made such a fuss before. She curiously examined herself up and down. Pink hair and sapphire blue eyes like the Emperor's, plus 4 tiny teeth. Everything felt novel to her. Meanwhile, the wet nurse and others were nervously and orderly making preparations. "This is the dress prepared for your Highness today. Isn't it beautiful?" Mabel's heart was instantly struck. She couldn't believe that she, who couldn't even afford food in her previous life, could wear such beautiful and gorgeous dresses in this life. After being dressed by the wet nurse, Mabel finally changed into her clothes. Everyone thought she was adorably irresistible. Just then, the Emperor pushed open the door, happily picked up his daughter, and with a smile wished her a happy birthday. The slow to realize Mabel was touched. This was the first time she had heard someone say these words to her. As a child, no one had ever celebrated her birthday. Even as an adult, she was always alone. So this is what it feels like to be blessed. Just then, the assistant notified them that it was time to enter. Mabel was very nervous after all. From birth until now, she had met fewer than 10 people. And beyond this door, there would be countless eyes staring at her. The Emperor noticed her unease and softly reassured her, "There's nothing to be afraid of here. They are all people who are here to please you, not you to please them." Thanks to the Emperor, Mabel was so frightened she lost her strength. Now presenting His Majesty the Emperor and Princess Mabel Gardenia. After a round of applause, the scene suddenly became quiet, looking at the chair beside the throne. Mabel already felt a lot of pressure. But unexpectedly, the Emperor placed her on the throne itself. Everyone present was dumbfounded. But the Emperor began to eloquently introduce his daughter, saying how much of a genius she was. Although people all agreed, Mabel felt extremely embarrassed, wishing she could dig a hole and crawl into it. As the Emperor announced the beginning of the banquet, most people enjoyed themselves. And Oscar also came over to his dear sister with a smile. Oscar came over smiling to wish her a happy birthday, and also revealed the Emperor's childish behavior of ordering that no one could wish Mabel a happy birthday before him, because he wanted to be the first to wish Mabel a happy birthday. Seeing the angry Emperor about to discipline Oscar, unexpectedly, Oscar boldly ignored him, bringing out his carefully prepared birthday gift, an exquisite and gorgeous emerald necklace. "This is my first gift to you, and all those things piled over there are also gifts for you." Looking at the pile of things, Mabel felt a lot of pressure. After all, she didn't even know what the gift givers looked like. And they certainly weren't just giving gifts out of pure intention. Seeing his daughter's reaction, the Emperor thought she was disappointed because there weren't enough gifts. But you don't need to be sad, because Dad has prepared a gift for you that's enough to amaze everyone. He quickly stood up, staring at the people from the Holy Empire, and said, "On the occasion of the princess's first major day in life, I announce the formal abdication of the throne to Mabel Gardenia." Mabel was so frightened her face turned green. and the reactions of the people present varied. But strangely, even though this meant there was no reason to take back the seed of God, the Holy Emperor still smiled mysteriously. The Emperor was extremely pleased, as he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. It turned out that 2 months ago, the Emperor had begun implementing his plan. First was Marquis Gardenia, who originally wanted Mabel to be the family's heir. But after hearing that the Holy Empire wanted to take away his precious granddaughter, he immediately agreed to the Emperor's suggestion. Next was Crown Prince Oscar. Father and son sat down for a rare heart-to-heart talk, with the Emperor asking if he truly wanted to become an emperor. After receiving an ambiguous answer, the Emperor directly stated he wanted to pass the throne to Mabel, as only this way would the Holy Empire have no reason to take her away. But if you're unwilling, I'll find another way. I agree. As long as Mabel isn't in danger, I don't care what happens to me. And if Mabel becomes emperor, I'll become her guardian knight. The Emperor never expected Oscar to love Mabel so much. But what was even more unbelievable to the Emperor was the former Empress, Duchess Donovan. Before the Emperor could even explain his plan clearly, Duchess Donovan agreed. And it turned out that the Duchess, who seemed not to care much about her son, had been quietly paying attention to his situation and understood Oscar best, knowing that his learning ability was strong but his talent for swordsmanship was even more outstanding. This was something the Emperor never expected. After resolving this issue, finally came the court ministers. Originally full of complaints, they knew that state affairs would still be handled by His Majesty the Emperor, so they dared not say anything more. Time returned to the day of the banquet. The Emperor was staring at the Holy Empire's king with a challenging look. When people learned that the Emperor had publicly announced the throne would be passed to the 1-year-old little princess, the scene immediately erupted in commotion. Except for a few informed people, other guests were panicked. At the same time, the Holy Empire's people also panicked, because they knew very clearly that this way there was no reason to take back the seed of God. However, through this meeting, the Holy Emperor definitely sensed that Mabel contained powerful holy power within her body, which would self-awaken when the time was ripe. So there was no need to waste energy on this. He stared at Mabel, muttering to himself as if no one else was there. The seed of God will eventually occupy this body. In the end, you will still come to find me, because the power you possess is enough to drive those around you crazy. At this moment, the Emperor on the stage was frowning with displeasure. He had thought the Holy Empire would directly try to snatch her, which would escalate to the national level, but didn't expect they would be so calm. But it didn't matter, as long as Mabel was safe. The Emperor believed from the bottom of his heart that Mabel was too young to understand these complex matters, so he didn't seek her opinion in advance. Unexpectedly, Mabel broke down crying on the spot. She never imagined the Emperor would be so ruthless. At the same time, she also felt sorry for Oscar. He had been studying hard every day to inherit the throne in the future, and now it was taken away just like that. The Emperor had no choice but to let the wet nurse take her back first. And Mabel cried sadly for a whole day, so much that her eyelids were swollen the next morning. She couldn't understand why the Emperor did this. Was it because her grandfather made her the heir? And because the Emperor and her grandfather had a bad relationship? But all three of them were very calm when it was announced yesterday. So there's only one truth. They had planned it in advance. Thinking of this, Mabel broke down again, so only she had been kept in the dark. The two people in the room were panicked, unable to understand what had happened. They could only hold her and keep guessing. At this moment, Mabel also realized if she wanted to get angry, she should direct it at the culprit of this matter. So she tried hard to call out Papa, though it came out as Baba. But it was enough for people to understand. The maid who understood excitedly carried Mabel to find the Emperor, and they arrived at the dining room door. Mabel dissatisfiedly twisted her body, indicating she wanted to get down and walk by herself. Then she angrily went to find the Emperor, but she didn't know this would have the opposite effect. Mabel wanted to walk to look more imposing, fiercer. However, the sight of her wobbling while calling Papa instantly won over the Emperor, because from the Emperor's perspective, it was his sweet little baby daughter. Who could not love that? Although in reality it was quite the opposite. You came here because you missed Daddy, right? Even though Mabel kept waving her little fists, the Emperor didn't feel a thing. On the contrary, Mabel was in pain. The Emperor was almost moved to tears holding his daughter. However, Mabel became even angrier. Only regretting that she was still too small, forget about revenge, she couldn't even tickle him. The happy Emperor brought ice cream to reward his precious daughter. The angry Mabel was instantly bought off. After all, it had been so long since she had tasted ice cream again. Suddenly she remembered her main purpose for coming here. So she became angry again and swung her little fist down, even shouting loudly, "No, I hate Baba." After saying this, she turned around and left angrily. The Emperor was petrified on the spot, unable to believe what he had just heard, asking his assistant what he had heard. From then on, whenever the Emperor came to visit, Mabel would cry loudly and ask him to go away. This behavior deeply hurt the Emperor's heart, and the clueless Lisandro even mockingly remarked, "Welcome to the PMH Club." In other words, people Mabel hates. This greatly angered the Emperor. Time passed for a long while. On this day, Oscar came to visit. Mabel just stared at him fixedly, feeling very sorry in her heart. because all this time Oscar had been tortured by courses for the sake of the throne, and she had seen it all. And now just one sentence from the emperor negated all his efforts. Mabel sincerely said "Sawi," but Oscar didn't understand. So she continued saying "Done like Empwe." Oscar asked, "Do you mean you don't like Daddy?" Mabel shook her head. "Then do you mean you don't want to be emperor?" Mabel nodded, but Oscar fell silent. This made Mabel very sad, feeling that Oscar must be heartbroken. But the next moment, Oscar happily jumped up. Because his sister was so young yet could understand what he said, she was truly a genius. He held Mabel in his arms and comforted her softly. "So you also don't want to be emperor? But there's nothing we can do, because this is a form of protection for you. You don't need to feel sorry for me. Actually, I don't want to be emperor. On the contrary, being able to be by your side and help you makes me very happy. If there's a chance in the future, I'll explain everything to you one by one." Meanwhile, the emperor received news of a mining war breaking out in the south. And the news stated that Duke Javier, who had gone to investigate the southern mines, happened to be on his way back. Such a coincidence made him suspect the Duke was also involved. Unfortunately, the old fox never dirtied his own hands. Instead, he used other nobles, causing their downfall. The emperor's anger made everyone present not dare to breathe, and the emperor also had a fit of anger on the spot. Everyone was very nervous, but unexpectedly he muttered to himself, "I need Mabel." Everyone's expressions changed from worry to confusion. The assistant anxiously confirmed again and again. Although the emperor angrily told him to shut up, he still felt some sympathy for this hot-tempered majesty. After all, he had poured out his full affection only to be disliked by his daughter. The emperor suddenly became eerily frightening, looking as if he would have him dragged out and beheaded on the spot. To save his life, he hurriedly revealed information. The princess goes out for a walk every day recently. Hearing this, the emperor's expression instantly softened. He grabbed his coat and rushed out. However, after the events of the past period, he only dared to look at his daughter from afar. Not only had she grown a little taller, even her hair had grown 1.4 millimeters, but not knowing why his daughter suddenly disliked him made him feel very troubled. Mabel, who was playing, suddenly felt someone was watching her, but when she turned around, there was no one to be seen. The emperor had just left to meet with the person in charge of the coronation ceremony. Just then, a divine beast suddenly appeared, jumped onto Mabel with a whoosh, frightening her. She had a feeling of both excitement and nervousness. Oscar smiled and told his sister she could pet the divine beast and praise it. Mabel did so in her childish voice. Unexpectedly, she suddenly heard an impatient voice. Mabel looked around for the source of the voice, even thinking she was hearing things. Unexpectedly, the voice continued, "What are you looking at? I'm right here." Only then did Mabel realize that the divine beast was talking to her. This was simply unbelievable. The divine beast stared at the cat food in front of it and kicked it dissatisfiedly, emphasizing once again that it was not a cat. "I am the divine messenger born to assist you. If you can understand that, then get me something humans can eat." Mabel's eyes were full of doubt, which angered the divine beast so much it jumped up and down. But just then, the wet nurse suddenly appeared, ending today's walk. Because today they needed to measure the dress for the coronation ceremony, so it would be very busy. Only the divine beast's miserable cry was left behind. "Don't just leave like that. Bring me something to eat." On the way back, Mabel unexpectedly ran into the emperor. Mabel had heard that the emperor had fainted during the last meeting, and wondered if his health had improved. However, the emperor turned his head away first. Mabel felt a bit sad in her heart. She couldn't help but mock herself. This is normal, after all. No parent would like a child like her who never smiled and didn't let them hug her. However, the emperor did so because last time his daughter said she hated him. He was restraining his impulse to run over, only hoping the two could clear up the misunderstanding soon. Just like that, a month passed, coming to Mabel's succession coronation ceremony. In the early morning, Mabel, still sleeping, suddenly heard a lot of noise around her. Opening her eyes, she found she wasn't in her room, and the emperor, whom she hadn't seen for a long time, came into view. Since her birthday. The two hadn't seen each other for a month. Why was he dressed so formally? Mabel looked around in confusion. She found a group of noble ministers standing in front of her, with a diamond-encrusted crown placed nearby. Could this be the coronation ceremony for inheriting the throne? She was extremely angry. She clearly didn't want to be emperor. Why were they planning someone else's life so casually? Mabel rushed over on her short legs, using extremely non-standard pronunciation, saying, "No empwe donwana." Then she kicked over the stool holding the crown. Even that wasn't enough to quell her anger. She directly kicked the crown at her feet far away. Everyone present was stunned. Mabel also suddenly felt she might have gone too far. But unexpectedly, a round of applause rang out. "Her Highness is indeed as excellent as rumored." That kick can be described as brave and powerful, indicating that in the future she will not listen to the words of sycophants and treacherous ministers, demonstrating her determination to be a wise ruler. The emperor also proudly praised his daughter, and gently placed the newly customized crown on her head. Indeed, a suitable crown should be customized for the new emperor. Everyone cheered congratulations to Her Majesty on her ascension to the throne. But Mabel believed this country had no hope. How could they really let such a small child be emperor? She returned to her new room. It turned out the emperor's assistant had also come here, saying he was here to assist her. Mabel was shocked and said, "No way." But the assistant thought she meant rest. "You can certainly rest today. You can start handling state affairs tomorrow." Baby speechless, baby shocked. "The ministers will come to pay their respects at tomorrow's court meeting. So see you tomorrow, Your Majesty." Mabel was completely annoyed, unable to understand how they could let such a young child handle state affairs. The country's destruction was just a matter of time. Just then, Mabel suddenly had a wicked smile, all kinds of bad ideas appearing in her mind. "Anyway, it's a country destined for destruction, so let me personally destroy it, and see if you still agree to let me sit on this throne." Today was Mabel's first meeting since her succession. The ministers present couldn't wait. They were very much looking forward to seeing the adorable Majesty preside over the meeting. And as her grandfather, Marquess Gardenia was especially pleased that he could finally see his granddaughter without any limit on frequency. Just then the villain Duke Javier walked in. The two arch-rivals immediately engaged in a silent duel, instantly frightening those behind them. Fortunately, Mabel entered at this time. Her cuteness captured the hearts of everyone present. They all marveled at how the previous tyrant Aes had given birth to such a soft and cute daughter. But the next moment, the tyrant they spoke of also appeared. Everyone seems to have forgotten to bow, a bunch of fools. Everyone felt disappointed. Their hope that the former emperor wouldn't attend the meeting was dashed. Soon the meeting began, and Mabel undoubtedly became a figurehead. And she also heard about the recent situation regarding the Devil of the Devlin. If I had known he would massacre, I wouldn't have covered for him that day. But that poor appearance also made it impossible to ignore. The next case was Viscount Vincent's wife's divorce application. It turned out the Viscount had allowed his mistress to move into the residence and had driven the Viscountess to a remote dwelling, causing the pregnant Viscountess to fall down a dilapidated staircase and miscarry. The Viscount not only showed no remorse but even gave his surname to the illegitimate child born by his mistress. Hearing this, father and daughter both gritted their teeth in anger. Simply garbage, a disgrace to humanity. Mabel angrily pounded the table, constantly mumbling, "I sentence Bincha du def." But everyone present had blank faces. Finally, after continuous effort, one minister got it right. Her Majesty is saying, "I sentence Vincent to death." Mabel was extremely happy, nodding her head quickly, and repeating her decision. Everyone burst into laughter. Even Marquess Gardenia changed from his usual manner and joked, "So has your dear old grandfather." Mabel was furious. How could everyone be playing with her, treating her words as nothing? Finally, to get Viscountess Vincent's divorce application approved, she hurriedly stamped it. Returning, Mabel was furious, pounding her bed in a frenzy. Just then, a blonde boy suddenly appeared, greeting Mabel. Seeing this, Oscar directly pushed him away, then held Mabel in his arms, gently comforting her. "Don't be frightened." The boy was stunned. Was the person in front of him really Oscar? He was completely different from usual. "Hello, little baby. My name is Enrique Javier. I'm your brother's friend." The next second, Oscar drew his sword. "How dare you?" Bow to Her Majesty immediately. The boy knelt down on the spot, apologizing for his disrespect. Mabel quickly placed her hand on his head, pardoning his crime. Oscar immediately shouted, "Mabel, how could you do this? I want a head pat too." As a result, the scene turned into this bizarre image. Scene change. Under the pitch-black sky, the Devil of the Devlin Empire rarely comes to his senses. How long he went berserk today he doesn't know. It turns out he's been cursed. Not only is his body immortal, even his mind has been controlled. He really wants to break free from this quagmire and soar high like an eagle. Suddenly he remembers Mabel. The moment their eyes met, he became completely lucid. He can't help but mumble, "Perhaps that child could lend me a hand. Let me attain the death I've longed for." Time quickly passed. 4 months gone by. Before she knew it, Mabel had been emperor for 4 months. During this time, she replaced her weaning diet, finally enjoying the delicacies specially supplied to the royal family. It must be said they were truly delicious. Now she knows. The reason the emperor passed the throne to her, it was all to prevent the Holy Empire from taking her away under the pretext of God's seed. She couldn't understand why the emperor would go to such lengths for her. And even though she didn't treat him well, he still maintained that smiling face. Just then, the emperor suddenly appeared, smiling as he reached out his hand to her. But Mabel still wouldn't give him a pleasant look. Instead, she directly hid in the assistant's arms. Because she felt that things should be kept separate, he had pushed her onto the throne without saying anything. Soon today's meeting began, with all the ministers smiling and praising her, saying her hairstyle today was even cuter. Mabel angrily used her baby voice to tell them to be quiet. "All of you, be silent!" Only then did they finally get to the main topic. This case concerned the verdict on Count Sequila's corruption charges. The next moment, the villain Duke Javier jumped out, indicating that he would stand on the side of the corrupt count. The ministers felt this was unreasonable, but he directly responded with sarcasm. "Are you opposing my suggestion?" In an instant, all the ministers shut their mouths. Only Marquess Gardenia still dared to confront him, saying the count had embezzled all the funds for the city's expansion. Wasn't that enough to convict him? But is there conclusive evidence? Duke Javier's arrogant manner made Mabel very upset. The old fox always blocked others' words with a sly smile, making judgments entirely based on his own will. How could such a person have given birth to an adorable son like Enrique? It turns out that Javier could be so arrogant because he owned power crystal mines. After all, in this world, magic crystals were extremely expensive and rare. Although the royal family had a considerable stock, it would still be sold out quickly. Seeing the Duke's haughty appearance, Mabel smiled. Perhaps it was time for her to take action. It happened a few nights ago. Mabel, who was sleeping, was suddenly awakened by intense discussions. But getting up to patrol around, she didn't find anyone. She thought it was the attendants arguing outside, but unexpectedly, when she opened the window, she discovered it was two owls. Mabel was stunned. The next day, the panicked Mabel sought out the divine beast early in the morning, explaining that she could hear animals talking. The divine beast lazily explained that this was because Mabel's abilities were beginning to awaken. Afterward, she would be able to converse with all living things in this world. Because God has chosen you, and I was born to help you. I know your soul must be far more mature than your small body. Although I can't explain it clearly, everything happens for a reason. But you'll have to explore the cause yourself. Time returns to the court meeting. Mabel smiles gently. This ability is not bad. It's perfect for dealing with the old fox in front of her. Mabel crosses her hands, with a determined expression, looking extremely cute. Much time passed, and on this day the assistant was reviewing political affairs. He discovered that the royal family's magic crystal reserves were not very abundant and would be sold out before long. By then, Duke Javier would act even more arbitrarily. What could be done? Just then, a baby voice emerged. Hi, Gustav. Mabel deliberately complained that it was too messy here, and said she wanted to help tidy up. How could the assistant let His Majesty personally take action? So he hurriedly got up from his seat. Mabel took the opportunity to run up, picked up the ink and asked with a smile, pretending not to know. What's this? The assistant immediately felt something was wrong. Sure enough, in the next second, ink dripped everywhere, instantly staining most of the documents black. The assistant Gustav was heartbroken, but could only quietly go get something to wipe it up. Although Mabel felt sorry, this was the only way to have time alone here. She hurriedly took out the prepared documents from her backpack. This was the paperwork for purchasing the Rogwell mine in the southwest. Although the handwriting was crooked, it was legible enough. Now she just needed to stamp it with the Emperor's seal to make it effective. She took the seal from the side and firmly stamped it. Just then the Emperor suddenly appeared, happily asking Mabel if she had come specifically to find him. But his daughter said she was here to see the assistant. The Emperor immediately became jealous. Demotion must demote him. At this moment, the assistant brought back Mabel's bunny doll. The sight of them happily together made the Emperor even more upset. Seeing that things were about to get out of control, Mabel hurriedly gave her doll as a gift to him. The old father's heart melted on the spot. After all, this was the first gift from his precious daughter, and the two took the opportunity to slip away from this place of trouble. In the evening, the assistant was shocked when he saw the mine acquisition document that Mabel had designed and placed in the daily approval files. Because the Rogwell mine in the southwest was known for its inferior iron ore, so the acquisition was obviously not a wise move. But the document clearly stated that there was a high possibility of magic crystals buried there, so even though the writing on it was quite clumsy because it had the royal seal, he still executed according to the document. Even the miners who were ordered to excavate thought this was absurd, but after they took action, they discovered large deposits of high-quality magic crystals. Before long, this news was transmitted to Mabel's ears through a mole. Thanks to Mole. Now the royal family's magic crystal reserves were very abundant, and they no longer needed to be constrained by Javier. Mabel couldn't wait to see the ugly expression on the old fox's face. Finally, on the day of the regular meeting, Mabel got up early to get ready, planning to eat something before going to watch a good show. But unexpectedly, she encountered Enrique, who had been waiting for a long time. The boy's innocent smile made Mabel feel instantly guilty. After all, he was the old fox's son. Afterward, the two ate desserts together in the garden. Mabel ate everything in one go. The thoughtful Enrique immediately pushed his portion over. Only then did Mabel notice the swelling on his face. But the boy lied, claiming it was from being stung by an insect. Mabel knew very well that these were marks left after being beaten. After all, it was the same in her previous life. Hopefully she was just guessing wrong. Soon the regular meeting officially began. This time they were still discussing the case of Count Sequila's corruption. The difference was that Javier no longer opposed, but agreed to severe punishment. Mabel was extremely happy. But strangely, the old fox not only wasn't anxious because of this, but instead smiled at her. After the meeting, the Emperor finally remembered about the mine. The assistant then took out the approved document. Looking at such clumsy handwriting and straightforward recommendations, the Emperor Emeritus immediately frowned. Who was helping the royal family? Who would come to the office that day? Apart from the maid responsible for cleaning, there was no one else. Oh right, Your Majesty came once. The Emperor Emeritus laughed on the spot. So, neither of them thought of Mabel. After all, what could a one-year-old child understand? Let's investigate with the maid as the focus then. After arranging everything, the Emperor came to his daughter's bedroom. Looking at her sleeping face, he felt both happy and distressed that one so young had to attend council meetings. Before leaving, he planted a kiss on his daughter's forehead, hoping she would have sweet dreams, and smile happily when seeing her father tomorrow. The next day, the old fox Duke Javier sent a letter. The assistant opened it very puzzledly. Inside it clearly wrote, hoping His Majesty the Emperor would bestow marriage between Mabel and his son Enrique. This made the assistant curse loudly. Learning of this, the tyrant immediately tore the letter to pieces and threw it into the furnace. Although smiling, his expression was terrifying. This news quickly spread throughout the empire, and all the noble families were gnashing their teeth. Because Mabel was also their ideal candidate for a daughter-in-law. Now that Javier had begun to act, they naturally wouldn't sit idly by. So from the next day onwards, young masters from various families successively appeared before Mabel, praising her as their parents had instructed, and offering flowers to please her. But Mabel directly said she didn't like flowers. She only liked shiny gold and jewels. Because in her heart, as long as you had money, you wouldn't have to worry about having no clothes to wear or food to eat. Hearing this, the boys shouted, "Dad, Mom, the Emperor says she likes gold and hates flowers." These words reached the ears of the Emperor Emeritus. His precious daughter actually didn't like flowers? How sad must she be walking in the garden every day? So the tyrant ordered on the spot to burn all the flowers in the garden. The next day, Oscar, who was about to return home, held his sister reluctantly. Although he only went back once every few months, his unwillingness was evident. After a series of coaxing by Mabel, he finally reluctantly got into the carriage and left the palace. Afterward, Mabel went alone to find the divine beast. But no matter how she tried, she couldn't find its shadow. Suddenly, she bumped into a boy, immediately falling to the ground. The boy was panicked, not knowing what to do. The next second, the tyrant appeared here, gently picking Mabel up, and ordering the boy to be thrown out of the palace. This wasn't enough. Finally, he even decided that from today on, regardless of which family, any boy around Mabel's age would not be allowed to enter the palace. Mabel froze on the spot. "What about Oscar, who had just left the palace?" Mabel anxiously shouted, wanting to say Oscar was still outside the palace. But the Emperor Emeritus could only understand the word Oscar. Then he was called away by the assistant. Mabel was extremely troubled. Even her usually favorite cake had lost its appeal, as she was solely focused on how to rescue Oscar. Perhaps she could go and pick him up herself, but without guards she couldn't even approach the palace gates. At this moment, Lisandro's image appeared in her mind. Actually, she really didn't want to ask this person for help, but for Oscar's sake, she still called out. The man outwardly calmly asked Mabel what the matter was, while inwardly he was already blooming with joy. Meanwhile, Oscar returned to the Duchess's mansion, led by the head maid to the dining room. He met his birth mother, whom he hadn't seen for a long time, but as soon as Duchess Donovan saw her son, she asked how his recent training was going. Upon hearing that he had been practicing diligently, she immediately raised her voice. "Diligence alone is not enough. After giving up the throne, didn't you decide to become His Majesty's knight? So you must make yourself more perfect, more unbreakable. Remember my words." Oscar didn't dare say much, only quietly agreeing. Originally, he had hoped that since he was no longer the heir to the throne, his mother's attitude might change. Unexpectedly, she still maintained the strict teacher attitude. He didn't stay long, directly getting into the carriage to return to the palace. Just this morning, without seeing Mabel, he had already begun to miss her. But when he arrived at the palace gate, he was stopped by the guards. "Sorry, Your Highness, we are executing the Emperor Emeritus's orders." Oscar was confused. Had his father ordered him banned from entering the imperial city? That made no sense. The Emperor Emeritus has ordered that anyone around His Majesty's age, regardless of family, is not allowed in. Oscar suddenly understood, fully approving of his father's actions. After all, Mabel was too cute. But he had been caught in the crossfire. "I will obey the order. Send someone in to inform the Emperor Emeritus." Just then, Mabel's voice came from not far away. Oscar couldn't believe it and pinched his own cheek. His sister had actually come out specifically to meet him. Mabel was seen taking steps, running over, grabbing Oscar's hand and running back. Oscar was completely moved. But the guards who weren't looking properly still stopped the two, saying they needed to report to the Emperor Emeritus first. Mabel was furious, about to explode the next second, declaring that she was the Emperor. Why did they need to wait? "You should listen to my orders, not the Emperor Emeritus's." Unfortunately, the guards couldn't understand. This made Mabel anxiously shout, "Go away." But the few remained unmoved. Lisandro laughed at how cute this was, quietly stepped forward and whispered a reminder, stating that he would inform the Emperor Emeritus. The three finally returned to the palace successfully. Oscar sincerely expressed his gratitude, while Mabel shyly didn't look back, just walking ahead with her head down. Oscar smiled. His sister was really too cute. No wonder he had been missing her all the way. At this time, Oscar asked puzzledly, "By the way, what's going on with you and Uncle? Usually when Uncle gets close to you, don't you cry? How come you're together today?" Mabel remembered what had just happened, and angrily stamped her foot, while Lisandro was amused to laughter. It turned out that a few hours ago, Mabel had asked him to bring Oscar into the palace, but he deliberately pretended to be very troubled, saying he was just a small guard without real power. Then he required Mabel to agree to a request. That was to give him the cake on the table, and then he would try his best to fulfill her request. How could there be such a shameless person, fighting with a child for food? As you said, if Oscar can't come in, he'll have to return to the Duke's mansion. Moreover, Oscar is especially afraid of my sister. How pitiful. Mabel thought for only 0.01 seconds, and still decided to part with it painfully. She stabbed the cake and quickly sent it into Lysandro's mouth. The man took advantage and still acted smug, saying he only wanted the cake, but didn't expect His Majesty would personally feed it to his mouth, truly gentle and considerate. Time returns to the present. Lysandro laughed uncontrollably. In the blink of an eye, he was suspended by the Emperor Emeritus, replaced by two burly men. Mabel was gloating 1 second. The next second she began to miss him, because these two were following too closely. Just then, she encountered Duke Javier, the old fox who had come to block her. The guard sensed the threat, directly standing in between. Seeing this, the old fox sarcastically said they were indeed good dogs raised by the Emperor Emeritus. Mabel, to vent her anger, deliberately pretended not to understand, asking where the doggies were. The old fox followed along, saying, "Just over there, but they might have run away now." After listening, Mabel asked in a baby voice, "How could doggies run here? Duke Javier, are you stupid?" But the Duke just paused for a moment, then forced himself to smile. After all, he wasn't here to chat with a child today. "What I want to talk to you about is regarding my son." Mabel was very puzzled. What exactly was he doing? "Enrique likes you very much. So does your Majesty like Enrique?" "I like him." "Then do you want to play with him every day? To live together every day, taste delicious food together, read and write together?" Javier was still rambling on. An arrow suddenly shot over, almost hitting Mabel. Fortunately, the maid was quick to embrace her, just managing to dodge. "Ambush. Quickly protect His Majesty the Emperor." The two personal guards instantly shielded in front, blocking the fierce attack. Javier seemed anxiously concerned about Mabel, shouting that guards would arrive soon, so there was no need to worry. The next second, another arrow flew over. Javier sacrificed himself to block it. Now Mabel realized that she was the target. If Javier hadn't been there just now, she would have been killed again. She trembled with fear. She had died so miserably in her previous life, finally reborn here. She didn't want to repeat the same mistake. So Mabel used all her spiritual power, summoning surrounding hornets to attack the assassins. Instantly, a black mass flew toward the masked people. The scene immediately became chaotic, but even so, it could only contain them temporarily. Fortunately, the Emperor Emeritus, a master swordsman, came rushing at the sound. All assassins fled in disarray. "Chase them. Don't let any of them escape." After arranging everything, he hurriedly ran to his daughter's side, carefully checking if she was injured, and held her tightly in his arms, softly comforting her. His anxious appearance was all seen by Mabel, but before she could make any reaction, she passed out due to physical exhaustion. Time jumps to 3 days later. Mabel has been continuously unconscious for 3 days, but the examination results show no abnormalities. It's just unclear why she hasn't awakened. Through investigation, this incident occurred because the palace's barrier master was bribed, allowing assassins to infiltrate the palace. And they happened to choose the time when the strongest, Lysandro, had been dismissed. Both father and son believed. This was sent by the Devlin Empire. Gnashing their teeth wanting to take them down, the atmosphere on site immediately dropped to freezing. The imperial physician was almost scared to death. So when will Mabel wake up? Shouldn't that question be asked to the doctor? The gaze of the two nearly killed the man. The imperial physician was so frightened he knelt and begged for mercy, rambling about his difficulties. Just then Mabel finally woke up. All three turned their heads in unison. The two father and son immediately surrounded her, asking if she felt unwell anywhere. The imperial physician also happily breathed a sigh of relief. Mabel was confused. She had only fallen asleep for a while. Why did they have such expressions? She didn't know she had been unconscious for 3 days. For the father and son, it had been an eternity. In the days that followed, no matter where she went, someone followed. Even the guards had increased a lot. Today, she finally convinced the two to come out and find the divine beast. "Earlier, you made hornets closely pursue those attackers' footsteps. I also followed to see." Mabel was eager to know who that person was. But unexpectedly, the divine beast said Mabel also knew the mastermind behind the scenes. It was Duke Javier, the old fox. Mabel was stunned on the spot, because at that time when she was attacked, Javier had even blocked an arrow for her. It was all just an act to deceive you. Mabel decided to find a way to get revenge. So this time, she could escape death, thanks to her superpower, and the Emperor Emeritus who came to the rescue. She didn't know when the next danger would come, so before that, she had to train well to protect herself. She must become stronger, until she could use this ability at will. Time quickly entered winter. Mabel often stayed with animals, so her abilities had improved. She was seen gently extending her hand to use spiritual power, and soon many green grasses grew on the ground. The small animals all ate very happily, but this was far from enough. To become stronger still required the accumulation of time. Mabel was very anxious in her heart because only by quickly becoming powerful could she punish Javier. Suddenly, a commotion came from the distance. Soldiers shouted that there was an ambush. Mabel's heart suddenly sank. Was it aimed at her again? At this time, Lysandro came rushing in urgently, stating that the devil of the Devlin Empire was attacking the imperial city, and they needed to quickly go to a safe place. Mabel was sent to the palace. After learning that the Emperor Emeritus personally went to battle, she couldn't help but recall the boy's miserable state last time. Would he die directly this time? Meanwhile, the Emperor Emeritus who came to battle was already confused, because the devil of the Devlin Empire not only didn't harm any of their soldiers, but even annihilated all the Devlin troops he brought. Is this Belon's trick? Why are you doing this? Because they interfered with my purpose for coming here. The old emperor became more confused, but the boy said, "Go bring your daughter, the emperor, to me." The cold tone and disrespectful demand instantly angered the man. Everyone present was shocked by the devil of the Devlin Empire's words. Obviously, a fierce battle was about to begin. The Emperor Emeritus, a master swordsman, initiated the attack first. But obviously, ordinary sword energy attacks had no effect whatsoever, just as he decided to use his unique skill. Mabel suddenly appeared, loudly stopping them. "Stop, don't fight anymore." The Emperor Emeritus panicked. How did his precious daughter appear here? The boy also simultaneously stopped his movements, staring at Mabel for a long time. This further confirmed his guess. The closer to Ermino Imperial City, the more lucid he became. And now he was in a completely clear state. It must have something to do with this little emperor. Mabel was a bit scared by the staring, but she believed the boy remembered her. So she summoned her courage to greet him and introduce herself. But unexpectedly, the boy not only showed no expression, but even walked directly towards her. The Emperor Emeritus completely panicked, shouting for Mabel to hide behind him. Even Lisandro hurriedly came forward to warn. The two men thus blocked in between. Mabel was very nervous, silently praying he wouldn't come over. Otherwise, he would be severely injured like last time. But what no one expected was, he directly knelt down to Mabel. "I will defect to Ermino. I want to become your subordinate. Please accept me, my master." The Emperor Emeritus was so angry that sword energy dispersed in all directions. It looked like he was about to tear the boy to pieces on the spot, but Mabel suddenly stood out and accepted the boy's request first. Originally, the Emperor Emeritus still wanted his daughter to withdraw this decision, but judging from her expression, it was clearly impossible. So he could only helplessly order people to first lock him in the dungeon. Not long after, Mabel had Lisandro take her to the dungeon. The girl nervously greeted him, and the boy actually introduced himself. "You can call me Adon." This development was unexpected for Mabel. She excitedly grabbed the bars and asked, "Why did you come here?" The boy's expression was cold, as if telling someone else's story. "Because I don't want to stay in Devlin, don't want to live like a dog." According to him, he was under the mental control of the Devlin Emperor, which was why he slaughtered lives on the battlefield. To avoid waking up in a place full of corpses, he came here. Although Mabel was very sad about this, she still didn't understand what direct relation this had to his coming here. Aiden didn't tell her the most direct reason, only saying that the Devlin Emperor really hated the Emperor Emeritus. So the carefully tamed dog running to the enemy's side would surely make him very angry, and he had just annihilated the troops Devlin brought. If Mabel didn't shelter him, he would have nowhere to go. Mabel immediately empathized, so he also had no family and was homeless. All along, he had been struggling alone. So she agreed on the spot to let the boy stay here. But the prerequisite was that he must listen to her and the Emperor Emeritus. The boy obediently nodded. Only then did Mabel breathe a sigh of relief, and turned to ask Lisandro to unlock his shackles. "It looks painful to be tied up like this." But obviously this was not allowed. After all, the boy was too dangerous. Mabel sincerely apologized to Aiden, and promised to help him unlock them soon. However, the next second, the boy gently exerted force. The shackles instantly became many fragments. "Now you feel more comfortable looking at it, right?" Mabel was dumbfounded. So he was really just being tied up. He could unlock them anytime if he wanted. Just before the two were about to leave, Mabel took out a basket and handed it to him. After returning, Mabel kept thinking about the boy, wanting to know how he was doing in the dungeon. But it was obviously impossible to find out from the Emperor Emeritus and Lisandro. So she secretly opened the window, using lots of cheese as a condition to ask the mice for help. "I want you to help me check on a child. He's locked in the lowest level of the dungeon. See what people he's met, what he's said, or if he's been punished or anything like that." As she sent off the mice, talking to herself, worrying about the boy, the Emperor Emeritus had already arrived behind her. The guilty Mabel was startled. "Someone said you went to the dungeon. Why have you been doing dangerous things since last time? If that guy goes berserk, he might hurt you." Unlike his usual joking manner, today's Emperor Emeritus was very serious. But Mabel thought of her promise to the boy, and still resolutely spoke out. "I made a promise with Aiden, so I will be responsible for him." The Emperor Emeritus was instantly struck hard. His heart couldn't help but ache. Mabel had always been indifferent to anyone. Now she actually cared so much about that brat. It seems necessary to go to the prison to see this Aiden. At this moment, Aiden was staring blankly at the basket in the dungeon. It was specially left by Mabel earlier. She said it contained delicious chocolate cake, but the boy never ate sweet things, so it remained there. Soon the Emperor Emeritus arrived. Angrily, he opened the dungeon door and walked in. "Tell me, what is your real reason for coming here?" The boy remained silent, merely observing the situation. "The only reason you're still here is because I've allowed it, so you'd better answer my question quickly." The boy finally realized that the man before him was the one truly in power, so he had no choice but to obey. "Actually, I've been under Belon's mind control all this time. It made me harm others without any awareness. But on the day I was being taken to the Ermino Empire, I encountered your daughter. At that moment, Belon's restrictions on me loosened. It was the first time I ever became conscious while under control." The Emperor Emeritus couldn't help but wonder about the truth of this. Could his recent battlefield stupor have been caused by Mabel? But now you're so far away from Mabel, doesn't distance matter? This distance is fine, but of course, the closer the better. Your distance from her stops here. I'm not like Mabel. I won't fully trust you. As for how to deal with you, I'll let you know once I've decided. As the Emperor Emeritus prepared to leave, he glimpsed the cake in the basket on the floor. It was his precious daughter's favorite dessert, the chocolate cake she was allowed only a small piece of each day. To think she had given it to this fellow, he was so angry he almost ate Adun alive. Meanwhile, Mabel was lying in the snow, greatly troubled. In 2 more months, she would have been emperor for a full year. During this time, she deliberately acted bratty and annoying. Yet the Emperor Emeritus continued to adore her as always. She would lie down during meetings, disregarding proper conduct. The ministers even took this as a sign of her trust. How could she successfully abdicate? This troubled her deeply. So far, her only achievement was rescuing Adun from prison. Although his residence was far from her private palace, it was still the best outcome possible. Soon, 2 months passed. Under her nurse's careful grooming, Mabel became even more adorable. Now she was confident after all, this year she could not only walk by herself, but also clearly express her true intentions, so this time she would surely succeed in abdicating. Let's go. Forward on the path to abdication. Today was Mabel's 2nd birthday celebration. Elegantly and exquisitely dressed, she walked toward the throne under everyone's gaze. Everyone, raise your heads. At Mabel's command, the ceremony officially began. Now please present the gifts you've prepared for Her Majesty. The first gift was a magic power crystal made from the core of a rare creature from the south. Next came the fur of a fierce wolf king from the north. All were extremely precious things, but Mabel maintained a cold, indifferent attitude throughout. The ministers trembled in fear, as Her Majesty's expression clearly showed dissatisfaction. The assistant Gustav also noticed something was wrong and hurriedly looked for something impressive. When he discovered Marquess Gardenia's gift, his eyes immediately lit up. The Gardenia family presents to Your Majesty the ownership of all buildings on the central street of the capital. Mabel was completely stunned. This was hardly a gift for a child. But she maintained her composure, as this time she needed to appear arrogant and unreasonable, to make people dislike her. Angrily, she said, "It's still too little," and demanded more gifts. Marquess Gardenia stepped forward to ask if she found the gift too insignificant. Mabel verbally agreed, though she felt very guilty inside. But for her abdication plan, she had to upset her grandfather. Marquess Gardenia's face instantly turned red. He was clearly displeased, but the next second he shouted loudly, "I knew this would happen. Just 1 building is too little. Not just for you, I find it embarrassing too. I originally wanted to give you the entire commercial district, but the assistant misunderstood. I should have transferred everything to your name long ago." Mabel was completely dumbfounded. Her grandfather was even kneeling before her, which went against all propriety. Yet Marquess Gardenia continued remorsefully, "It's all my fault for not being thorough enough, ruining your birthday. I'll give you the Gardenia Commercial Guild too, though it might still be insignificant." Hearing this, everyone became nervous and began apologizing to Mabel, all offering their most precious possessions. Mabel anxiously looked to the Emperor Emeritus for help, but the Emperor Emeritus misunderstood, proudly stating that his gift was absolutely the best. But when Mabel opened it, she found it was the deed transferring ownership of the Kingdom of Orphan. Mabel immediately clenched her fists in anger. Despite going to such lengths, she still hadn't provoked any dissatisfaction or disappointment. Just then, Oscar entered the room. Smiling, he wished her a happy birthday, and placed a jeweled bracelet on her wrist. It clearly matched last year's necklace as part of a set, and amazingly, it could adjust its size to fit her wrist. He also brought Enrique's gift and a letter. The letter contained heartfelt words, and the gift was Mabel's favorite hard-to-get chocolate. Mabel smiled with satisfaction, because these 2 items were the only true birthday gifts she had received today. At this moment, Ace could only see that his daughter didn't like this year's birthday gifts. Nevertheless, he still believed his gift was the grandest, and was planning which country to give her next. Just then, he noticed something glowing nearby. Looking closer, it appeared to be a small stone. The assistant said it was a holy relic sent by the Holy Empire. The Emperor Emeritus's expression changed instantly. He ordered the item to be removed immediately. He wouldn't let his precious daughter see it. The assistant, troubled while organizing things, wondered what excuse he could use to return the item. But he didn't notice that just before he closed the door. The stone mysteriously disappeared. That night, just after midnight, Mabel tiptoed out of bed, making her way to the balcony. She had received a note from a mouse. It was sent by Adun. It clearly stated, "Come to the balcony after midnight tonight." But looking around, she saw no one. Suddenly, a barely noticeable light appeared in the distance. Upon closer inspection, it was a bag full of gold coins. Mabel beamed with joy. Adun truly understood her heart. After all, cash was king. Meanwhile, Adun was quietly watching Mabel. Seeing her leave happily, he smiled with contentment. Early the next morning, Mabel stretched lazily and turned her head, only to bump into a stone. She hadn't seen it yesterday, yet now it appeared here. She thought perhaps it was from Adun's package, so out of curiosity she reached out to touch it. But the next second, the stone went straight through her body. The burning pain made Mabel involuntarily tear up. It took a long while before she recovered. Filled with questions, she sought out the divine beast, and learned this was the holy relic, something that could enhance divine power. Mabel was overjoyed, until she heard it was something only the Holy Empire possessed. She instantly became tense. What exactly were those people planning? In the days that followed, Mabel continued to slack off, lying down and sleeping during daily meetings, just hoping for a quick abdication. She heard that the western region was suffering from severe drought, with not a drop of rain for several months. Although supplies were being prepared, prolonged drought could cause public panic, so strategies were needed to stabilize public morale. At this point, the old fox Duke Javier smiled slyly. We could hold a rain prayer ceremony? What devious plan was he hatching? This would comfort the northwestern population suffering from famine, since such a ceremony requires the emperor's presence and distribution of relief supplies to care for the people. Naturally, the emperor emeritus opposed. After all, Mabel was still too young, and appearing in public was premature. However, Mabel suddenly became interested, deciding to play along and see what his sinister plan was. Yes, I can hold the rain prayer ceremony. The emperor emeritus anxiously tried to dissuade her, as it was too dangerous outside the imperial city, and the journey to the west was very long. Though appeasing the people was important, his daughter's safety was more crucial. Father, won't you be coming along too? The emperor emeritus's heart was instantly touched, so his daughter felt safe because he would be with her. His daughter must believe he was the most powerful, so there was no problem. But I have one condition. Since Duke Javier has such a caring heart for the people, you must be willing to do anything for them, right? So you shall prepare the food. The old fox had no choice but to force a smile. Marquess Gardenia twisted the knife, congratulating him on his good assignment, and reminding him that the West was severely short of water, so he must prepare drinking water along with food. But since the Javier family was the empire's wealthiest merchant group, this amount of money shouldn't be a problem, right? It was truly satisfying to see Javier so embarrassed. Soon the day of departure arrived. This was Mabel's first time leaving the imperial city, so she felt both nervous and excited. She looked around searching for Aiden, but before she could find him, Oscar came running over anxiously, asking if she was afraid. After all, she was going so far away from home. No matter how Mabel explained, Oscar still thought his sister was just pretending to be brave. But don't worry, whatever happens, I'll protect you. So look forward to seeing my abilities. Mabel felt touched. Today Oscar truly seemed like a big brother. Suddenly Enrique appeared too. Mabel happily ran to him and asked about his well-being. Haven't you been bitten by bugs lately? Enrique smiled brightly, saying, Thank you for your concern, Mabel. Now Mabel was even more puzzled. What exactly was the old fox planning to even bring Enrique along? While she was pondering, she was suddenly picked up by the Emperor Emeritus. We're about to leave, are you ready? He gently placed his daughter in the carriage and reminded her to sit still. Mabel hesitated for a moment, then called out to Aes, asking if he wanted to ride together. This time, the Emperor Emeritus surprisingly declined. He just gently kissed his daughter's forehead. This time, Father wants to protect you from the front. If possible, we'll ride in the same carriage on the way back. Everyone looked very tense, which Mabel couldn't quite understand, but this feeling of being protected still moved her. The next day, the group arrived in the western region. Mabel was changed into ceremonial clothes and walked toward the altar to the sound of drums. And here, something unexpected happened. The situation was far worse than imagined. The grasslands were completely withered. Water was nowhere to be seen. The people were delighted that the emperor had come in person. After all, once the ceremony ended, they would receive water and food supplies. Previously, Mabel had thought Duke Javier was up to some trick, but she had never seen such severe conditions, even in her previous life. She sincerely wanted to do something for these people. Even if it was just to bring a little rain, she spread her arms, pressed her hands together in prayer, and cried out in her heart, Rain, please fall down. The previously clear sky suddenly became covered with dark clouds, and it actually began to pour. All the people were overjoyed. This rain, months late, was truly a divine blessing. Mabel was also very happy, surprised it had actually worked. The attentive Emperor Emeritus quickly draped his clothes over his daughter, fearing she would catch cold in the rain, not caring that he himself was soaked through. Suddenly, the crowd began to stir. It's Her Majesty who created this miracle. The gods heard Her Majesty's prayers and brought the rain. Mabel shook her head vigorously. If everything was attributed to her, abdication would become even more impossible. So she brazenly shouted, Father is amazing. It's really raining. It was Father who made the rain fall, right? Because Father is a master swordsman. Public opinion was instantly diverted, with everyone cheering, Long live the Emperor Emeritus. And the rain prayer ceremony concluded perfectly. Inside the tent, Javier was trembling with rage, because his proposal for the rain ceremony was just a pretense. Many years ago, the empire had fallen into crisis due to a rare drought. Only with the financial aid of the Javier family did they overcome it. It was then that Javier, as a nouveau riche, obtained his title and honor. He had planned to repeat this to elevate his family's status and embarrass the imperial family, but it backfired completely. This was too bizarre. Even with a large amount of high-purity magic crystals, it was impossible to make rain fall for so long. This was definitely beyond human capability. Just then, Enrique walked in. Javier asked with a dark face, How are the things I asked you to do? Father, I really don't want to do this. Enough, you useless thing. You can't even persuade such a small child. I don't want to see you. Get out. The heartbroken Enrique stood dejectedly in the rain. By now, Mabel had collapsed into bed from exhaustion. As the rain had drained all her divine power, suddenly the Emperor Emeritus told her with a smile, "We can go home now." Home? Yes, our home. Mabel's face instantly turned red. In her previous life, she had envied her friends who had their own homes and families waiting for them to return. But the word home had never belonged to her. Now everything was different. My precious daughter must be exhausted. When we get back to the Imperial City, we'll eat all the precious medicines from across the continent. Mabel sat up gently, muttering softly, "I don't like those things," but the undisguised smile on her face betrayed her. After a brief rest, the group officially began their journey back to the palace. By now, Mabel had been moved by the Emperor Emeritus, unconsciously falling in love with this feeling of unconditional acceptance. Oscar, seeing his sister lost in thought she was unhappy. He became sad. "Is it because I replaced father in the carriage? But I was worried about you too and wanted to see you." Seeing this, Mabel hurriedly explained loudly, "It's not like that. I'm very happy to return with you." Now Oscar was finally happy. But then Mabel asked about Aidun. "Do you know where he is? I have to take responsibility for him." Oscar was completely stunned. His adorable sister actually cared about another boy, even saying she had to take responsibility for him. He quickly changed the subject to prevent his sister from thinking about other boys. "We can explore along the way back to the city. Isn't that something to look forward to?" Afterwards, Mabel experienced many different things, feeling things completely different from the Imperial Palace. Time flew by and the group was ready to head back. The considerate Emperor Emeritus instructed Oscar to take good care of his sister and asked Cicero to patrol the rear. But Aiden was very surprised to see the man. "Why is Viscount Dargo here?" The man ran to the front of the procession and knocked on the carriage window, instantly waking the sleeping Mabel. "My apologies, Your Majesty. I wanted to inform you. The road ahead might be a bit rough, so the carriage will be bumpy." Oscar was unhappy that such a small matter had woken his sister. "Don't mind him. Lean on me and sleep." Mabel, who had consumed too much energy, fell asleep again, hoping to reach the palace in one sleep. But not long after, magical pillars suddenly descended from the sky. The horses were startled and reared up, creating instant chaos. Then a sharp sword suddenly pierced the carriage from behind. Luckily, Mabel dodged it swiftly. Seeing this, Oscar wanted to take his sword out to fight, but was grabbed by Mabel. After some persuasion, they all left the carriage together. However, the situation outside was dire. According to reports, there were at least 3 master-level magicians, and our people couldn't resist them. Just then, many flaming arrows suddenly shot down from the sky. Mabel glared at them, and instantly all the arrows vanished without a trace. Everyone thought it was the Ermino Empire's magicians who had blocked the attack. But the true guardian, Mabel, held her brother's hand firmly and resolved. "This time, I will protect you." She discreetly used her spiritual power to defend against the fiery arrows from the sky. Just then, Cicero ran over urgently, claiming he knew where the Emperor Emeritus was and would escort them to reunite. With that, he headed into the depths of the forest. Suddenly, the enemy attacked again, as if knowing their movements. Oscar quickly shielded his sister, blocking all the arrows, while Mabel quietly dealt with the stragglers from behind. She couldn't help thinking about the Emperor Emeritus. Normally, he should have been the first to arrive in such a situation. Why was there no sign of him today? Had something happened? Suddenly, a black-robed magician appeared and fired an attack at Mabel. The girl's first thought wasn't for herself, but for her brother Oscar behind her. To prevent her brother from being harmed, she directly pushed him away, just as Mabel was preparing to accept her fate. She found that Cicero had blocked this fatal blow for her. The man anxiously asked if she was injured, his concern seeming genuine. Mabel felt very remorseful. Cicero had taken such a serious injury to protect her, but the next second, she glimpsed the sword in the man's hand. It was the same one that had stabbed at her in the carriage. She couldn't help muttering, "That sword." The man's expression changed instantly. "You've discovered it so quickly. Then I must advance my plan." Saying this, he grabbed Mabel and warned Oscar not to make any moves. Everyone was stunned. "What are you doing? Put down your sword now." The man smiled triumphantly. "I've been undercover for a year, and no one discovered me. What a bunch of fools. Let go of Mabel now, or my father will not spare you." The man laughed even more uncontrollably. "How do you think the Emperor Emeritus will save you? He's been hit by our Lord's self-created paralysis magic, and is probably in pain, surely immobilized and being taught a lesson by my subordinates. Let's go see the Emperor Emeritus now, see his immobile state. And while we're at it, eliminate the little emperor he adores so much in front of him. That would be more interesting." Mabel couldn't believe these words. Believing that her father would definitely be fine, the urgent matter now was to escape quickly, to protect everyone, including her father. So she released her magic power, summoning all the flying insects in the mountains, and controlling tree roots to break through the soil. All attacks headed toward the man. Mabel seized this opportunity to escape, but at the critical moment she was grabbed. The man angrily raised his sword and slashed directly at Mabel. At this perilous moment, The long-missing Emperor Emeritus suddenly appeared, taking the fatal blow for her. The man was severely injured himself, yet still smiled and asked his daughter if she was hurt. "Daddy's here. Daddy promised to protect you, to keep you from danger." Cicero laughed wildly, pulling out his sword. "Being hit with magic that could knock out monsters yet still running here, you're truly a madman." Seeing his mission accomplished, the man turned and fled. Oscar, the only clear-headed one present, immediately ordered pursuit. "Don't let that guy escape." Meanwhile, Mabel was completely panicked, continuously pressing on the Emperor Emeritus's wound, but the blood kept gushing out uncontrollably. "Why did you do this? Why shield me with your body? Are you stupid? What should we do now?" Mabel kept questioning him, while tears streamed down uncontrollably. The Emperor Emeritus gently wiped away her tears and smiled, answering, "There's no need for so many whys. It's because you're my most beloved, precious daughter in this world." Mabel's heart shattered. Actually, she had always felt this parental love, but in her previous life, she had also thought she was truly loved, only to be unpredictably abandoned and hurt later. So she assumed the person before her would be the same, and had always refused to accept and face it. Seeing the Emperor Emeritus about to close his eyes forever, Mabel could no longer hold back. In her heart, she kept repeating, "Don't go, I promise I'll be good." She was speaking both to her mother from her previous life, and to the current Emperor Emeritus, having finally crossed that wall in her heart, only to face such an outcome. Had she known, he would never have treated her so tenderly from the beginning. She cried hysterically, "Don't go, don't leave me alone." Suddenly, a golden pillar of light shot into the sky from deep in the forest. Then tiny specks of light fell like rain. All the soldiers felt an unprecedented warmth, and the wound on the Emperor Emeritus's chest miraculously healed. He also regained consciousness immediately. Seeing his daughter crying so desperately, the old father's heart nearly broke. He quickly asked if she was hurt, but the next second, Mabel fainted. When the young emperor was in danger, where did the male protagonist Aidun go? Before the attack occurred, Aidun had recognized Viscount Dargo. The man was Emperor Devlin's confidant, who had clearly disguised his identity to infiltrate the Ermino Empire. Originally, he wasn't interested in the feud between the two countries, but he couldn't allow Mabel's safety to be threatened. So Aidun immediately informed Lysandro, who was standing nearby. But before the man could understand the situation, sounds of an ambush came from the front. Seeing the chaos outside, Aidun knew that Devlin had made thorough preparations. Lysandro shouted at the boy, "You're still under surveillance and can't act alone." But in the next second, the enemy's Grand Mage launched an attack on him. Instantly, everyone was immobilized, and even knocked unconscious on the spot. The attackers didn't linger, immediately retreating. So Devlin's target was the young Emperor Mabel. The boy feared for her life. After all, Mabel was the only one who could remove the Emperor Devlin's curse from him. He moved quickly, observing the situation. While searching for Mabel, suddenly he heard soldiers chasing Cicero nearby. When he spotted Viscount Dargo, Aidun lunged directly at the man, then pinned him to the ground. "Long time no see, Viscount Dargo." While the man was still boasting, Aidun immediately twisted his hand until it broke, and knocked him unconscious. "Come and take him away." The soldiers, seeing Aidun, didn't dare approach. The boy kicked the man toward them. "He's a spy from Devlin, Viscount Dargo. This man is very cunning, you must guard him carefully." After saying this, he continued searching for Mabel. Suddenly, a beam of light shot out from the forest ahead. Tiny specks of light scattered across the ground. Aidun felt an unprecedented warmth. What met his eyes was the unconscious Mabel, and the heartbroken, crying Emperor Emeritus. He knew he had arrived too late. That evening, the group finally returned safely to the palace. The two, one large and one small, stayed by her side. As a father, the Emperor Emeritus blamed himself terribly, believing it was all his fault, that he shouldn't have stupidly fallen for someone else's magical attack, shouldn't have insisted on protecting his daughter from outside the carriage, and shouldn't have agreed to hold the rain prayer ceremony. Even Oscar felt deeply guilty for failing to protect his sister. Ace sincerely comforted his young son. "This isn't your fault. It's my failure to protect you both. Go rest now." At this time, Lysandro brought Aidun to report. After learning that Cicero was actually Devlin's confidant, the man didn't show much emotion, only telling Aidun to return first, and that he would be rewarded later. Seeing the Emperor Emeritus's condition, Lysandro was very concerned, because since Mabel had fallen unconscious, he hadn't slept for a whole week. Although the royal physician diagnosed that Mabel had no physical problems, the Emperor Emeritus was still trapped in endless self-blame. "My head hurts so much I can't sleep, and I'm madly craving someone's life. Although I promised Sienna not to take lives casually. This time she would definitely understand me." After saying this, he took his sword and walked to the dungeon, directly taking the life of the spy Dargo. Days passed one after another. Everyone was immersed in sorrow, and the cause of Mabel's coma and its treatment remained elusive. The story of how she saved everyone that day gradually spread. Now everyone in the Empire knew about it, directly confirming the prophecy of the Seed of God. Soon a month passed. Mabel still showed no signs of waking. Clearly, apart from seeking help from the Holy Empire, there was no other way. If this continues, not only will His Majesty have problems, but you will too. So please make a decision quickly. even if just for the emperor you cherish. The Emperor Emeritus finally made up his mind, asking his assistant to bring paper and pen. At this moment, Mabel was still trapped in her dreams. In her childhood, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't gain her parents' love, eventually even being abandoned to live alone. Every day she could only grit her teeth and endure, yet still couldn't cope with life's pressures. Poverty, cold, hunger surged toward her endlessly, until she was overwhelmed. Whenever she felt deeply pained, she longed for a place that could shelter her from wind and rain. To protect herself, she sealed off her heart, yet still hoped someone would break through and give her warmth. Suddenly, the Emperor Emeritus appeared, with his unique embrace and unwavering protection. In the end, he was even willing to pay with his life. All these things were so touching. Having never experienced being loved before, she had always been suspicious. Now Mabel was certain the Emperor Emeritus truly cherished her. She murmured to herself, "Though it's a bit late, can I call you Daddy?" In a daze, Mabel reached out her hand and called him Daddy. The Emperor Emeritus, who had aged several years, could hardly believe it. Trembling, he embraced his daughter, fearing it was all just a dream. That one word, Daddy, pulled the Emperor Emeritus back from the edge of collapse. The reason this title had such power was because previously Mabel had only called him Father Emperor, never Daddy. So he had doubted whether he wasn't good enough, hadn't earned enough trust from his daughter, which was why she remained so distant. Now he finally heard what he wished for. Everything felt like a dream, so he could only hold her tighter and tighter still, to confirm that all this was really happening. Soon, news of Mabel's awakening spread throughout the palace. Everyone was very happy. Oscar was no exception. He had thousands of questions to ask her, and wanted to check on his sister's condition right away, but he felt he didn't deserve to. He had said he would become a knight. Yet when the critical moment came, he couldn't protect anyone. Meanwhile, Mabel was observing her own changes. Only now did she truly accept her new life as Mabel. She vowed never to ignore her family's genuine feelings again. Just then, the Emperor Emeritus entered. Smiling, he picked up his daughter, telling her he had found sweet medicine that would restore her health after taking it for a while. Mabel knew her father must have gone to great lengths for her, so she loudly expressed her delight. The old father was overjoyed, telling his daughter she could ask for anything she wanted. The girl truly felt her dad's loving heart. Holding his hand tightly, she said, "Thank you for taking care of me. Silly child, it's what I should do." At this moment, Mabel remembered her brother, whom she hadn't seen for a long time. "Where is Oscar? Has he gone to Duchess Donovan's?" The Emperor Emeritus calmly replied. "He's been practicing swordplay in the palace every day, seeming to have a lot on his mind." Mabel was very concerned, and decided to go see him herself. Before reaching the training ground, she heard the swishing sounds of sword practice. She turned and said she wanted to go watch. Lysandra smilingly agreed, and called out to Mabel before she left. "It's wonderful that you've awakened. To stand behind you and protect you again, I am truly happy." Mabel was deeply moved. Then Lysandra distinctly said, "You must be careful not to fall, after all, our emperor is a small round one." Feeling teased, Mabel angrily decided to settle accounts with him later. Finally, the girl saw her long-missed brother, so she happily ran toward him. But when Oscar saw his sister, he immediately dropped his sword and fled. Mabel anxiously shouted and chased after him, but fell because she was running too fast. She deliberately lay on the ground. Sure enough, Oscar came over worriedly to check her injuries. After confirming his sister wasn't hurt, he quickly said a few words, and was about to leave again. Mabel grabbed his hand and asked sadly, "Why are you avoiding me? Do you hate me? Are you tired of me?" Oscar lowered his head dejectedly. "You're my only sister. How could I hate you? I said before that I would protect you, but instead let you get so badly hurt. Someone like me has no right to see you." Mabel finally understood what her brother was thinking, and was both heartbroken and angry. "Oscar, you're such a fool. How could you think that way? Family doesn't need qualifications. We should protect each other. You protect me, and I'll protect you too." Oscar's heart was instantly healed. His sister finally treated him like family. The two embraced tightly. That night, Mabel was overjoyed to have a brother even younger than herself. But on such a comfortable night, she had a nightmare. She dreamed of being cruelly abandoned by her previous life's parents again. This time she didn't mind. But then she dreamed of her father emperor and brother speaking harshly to her. This was something she couldn't accept. Mabel woke up frightened from the dream, only to meet the anxious looks of the two. "Darling, did you have a nightmare?" "Don't be afraid, I'm here." The two held her hands, giving her warmth. Oscar suggested sleeping with his sister. The Emperor Emeritus, not to be outdone, said he alone was enough. The two argued incessantly, a scene that made Mabel feel secure. She vowed to protect her loving father and brother. The next day was the day Elder Clement from the Holy Empire came to visit. When he placed his hand on Mabel's wrist, the girl clearly felt the discomfort in her body ease considerably. But the man still stated that although the uncontrollable holy power had stabilized a lot, it could still go out of control at any time. So she needed to be careful when using her healing abilities. Mabel, Winter, Gardenia, Erminot, Your Majesty. At this title, the Emperor Emeritus immediately unhappily asked him to remove Winter. But the man cleverly claimed that since he was helping Mabel recover, her seed of God surname should be acknowledged. Mabel finally understood. Of course the Holy Empire wouldn't help her for nothing. But all these consequences were because the Holy Empire had sent a sacred object that activated her holy power, which led to it becoming uncontrollable. So it all seemed more like a premeditated conspiracy. Is the seed of God that good? Seeing Mabel ask this, the Emperor Emeritus panicked. But Mabel secretly made a gesture of silence to him. The man excitedly explained that the seed of God's status was second only to God, a most special existence. Mabel smiled slightly, having found a solution. She had learned from a book that there was something only the Holy Emperor could possess, representing the highest authority of the Holy Empire. So she smirked and said, "You know about Yellium, right? If that's the case, it should belong to me, so give me the Yellium." Instantly, everyone was petrified. Clement was completely stunned, unable to succeed despite all his persuasion. "Obviously, if you don't give me the Yellium, you're not acknowledging my status, and I won't add the Winter surname." Clement frantically explained it belonged to the Holy Empire's king, and he couldn't decide. Then quickly left. The Emperor Emeritus proudly picked up his daughter, amazed she had solved this difficult problem so easily. Mabel was determined to resolve all unfavorable factors, but she needed a helper, so she asked for assistance. The Emperor Emeritus agreed without thinking, but was surprised when Mabel said she wanted Adun as her knight protector. The Emperor Emeritus was stunned, immediately refusing, citing that the devil of the Devlin Empire was too dangerous. Mabel immediately became a judge, emphasizing how Adun had caught the spy Cicero. "Dad, didn't you say you would fulfill whatever I wanted? Are you going back on your word now?" Such a pitiful look made the Emperor Emeritus unable to refuse. He could only force a smile and agree. The only condition was that she couldn't leave Lysandro's sight. Thus, the two began to be inseparable. To completely overthrow the mastermind behind this, Devlin, Mabel extended an invitation to Adun. "Do you want revenge on Balan too? Then let's do it together." The boy immediately knelt on one knee to express his loyalty. "You can command me for anything." Looking at the girl's departing figure, he felt a desire to accompany Mabel for a long time. That night, Emperor Balan of Devlin received news of Adun's betrayal. Going back in time, the righteous Adun had pretended to comply, successfully gaining the trust of the Devlin Emperor, then proposed to lead troops alone to flatten the enemy country, the Erminot Empire. Looking at the arm cut off by Aes, he laughed maniacally, immediately agreeing to Adun's request. But today he received news of betrayal. He secretly vowed to make them both pay. Soon, 3 years passed. Mabel had grown a lot, no longer a baby who could barely speak clearly. Now her holy power had greatly increased, enough to break through the palace barrier and bring sacred beasts to live there. And Adun remained by her side as her knight protector. But what was troubling was that Devlin had become very cautious recently. There were no clues about the spies hidden in Erminot. There was no other way but to continue investigating. The two were walking in the courtyard, Mabel looking around admiring the flowers. Suddenly she slipped and was about to fall. Fortunately, Adun beside her caught her before she was hurt. However, in the next second, the father and son appeared ominously, calling in unison, "Come here." The atmosphere was very tense. Mabel realized her old father was jealous, so she sweetly called him Daddy and explained the situation. "If not for Adun, I would definitely have been hurt. So thank you for saving me." Dad should also say thank you to Adun. Her adorable manner was impossible to refuse, so he could only reluctantly say thanks. At that day's meeting, Mabel learned that drought was rapidly spreading throughout the country. While worrying about what she could do for the people, she diligently stamped documents. Then she heard a minister mumbling, "I came just to see Her Majesty. She's so cute. Why can't I be that document?" Mabel was completely speechless, thinking if she really were a child, she'd be spoiled rotten. Just then, the old fox suddenly raised his hand and asked, "Emperor Emeritus, the founding celebration is coming soon, right? I suggest having the Emperor attend in person. It would certainly enhance our national prestige." The Emperor Emeritus knew Duke Javier surely had ulterior motives. But even if his precious daughter didn't attend this time, some people would always covet her. Since it was impossible to keep her completely sheltered, he might as well let her attend, to let everyone know that Mabel was not someone to be trifled with. So the Emperor Emeritus asked his daughter's opinion. "If you want to attend, Dad will help you with all his might." The girl smiled brightly and agreed on the spot. After the meeting, the Emperor Emeritus began preparing for Mabel's first attendance. Several people expressed they would prepare the finest jewelry and clothing for her, and asked the assistant to investigate which clothing store was most popular among noble ladies recently. "Leave it to me," the Emperor Emeritus said confidently, giving Mabel an ominous feeling. Sure enough, it soon came true. The Emperor Emeritus actually put Duchess Donovan in charge, who was his ex-wife. Their relationship was extremely awkward. Mabel was stunned by the atmosphere. "Have you received palace etiquette education, dance lessons? What are you learning now?" All 3 questions had negative answers. Because the Emperor Emeritus spoiled her too much, only letting her play, making Mabel so embarrassed she wanted to find a hole to hide in. But unexpectedly, the Duchess said, "If you have nothing to do tomorrow, shall we visit the clothing store on Licavelle Street?" Mabel's eyes instantly brightened, because that was the most prosperous commercial street in the capital. But Father Emperor won't agree, will he? "I'll speak to the Emperor Emeritus personally. It would be better for you to experience and observe for yourself." Mabel happily agreed. The two would go out alone together. The next day at the training ground, Aiden and Oscar were sparring. Mabel's appearance immediately attracted both their attention. Passing knights stared at the little emperor, calling her cute, but were glared back by Oscar. Everyone could only flee. Mabel called the two over to eat desserts. Aiden, though disliking sweets, forced himself to eat. This made Oscar find it very funny. So he deliberately said Aiden loved pastries and should eat more. Suddenly Mabel exclaimed, "Oh no, Oscar, I'm going out of the palace with Duchess Donovan tomorrow." Knowing this, Oscar was very surprised, nervously saying he couldn't join them. But actually Mabel just wanted to learn about Duchess Donovan, like what she liked and disliked. Oscar didn't know his mother's preferences, but he was certain of one thing: she disliked ignorant people. Soon the day of the outing arrived. Learning the truth, Mabel was trembling with fear, because she was exactly the type of person the Duchess disliked. The Duchess didn't speak throughout the journey, only making some sounds when they reached their destination. So Mabel secretly resolved to appear mature and steady today. Soon they entered the shop. After the attendants curtsied to Mabel, a crowd of people took her to the changing room, saying this was the most fashionable style in the capital recently. It was a miniaturized version of adult styles, showing the clothing's lines in more detail. Mabel could barely breathe in it, but when the Duchess asked her opinion, to appear dignified, she still gritted her teeth and said it was beautiful. Unexpectedly, the Duchess had pre-ordered another style. Unlike the previous one, this dress only needed one person to help put on, making it convenient to wear. The moment she put it on, Mabel couldn't help but exclaim. The dress was incredibly light and comfortable. This was the Duchess's purpose in ordering it, because she believed that although Mabel held a high position, she was still a child and didn't need to try adult styles so early. After saying this, she told the shop owner to wrap up all the clothes in front of them. Everyone was stunned with surprise. But what was even more astonishing was yet to come. They visited countless shops, and because nothing caught their eye, the Duchess bought everything, doing the same at each place. After shopping for who knows how long, they finally finished. Walking out of the store, Mabel unexpectedly met Enrique. In just 3 years, the boy had grown very tall, making Mabel almost not recognize him. The boy politely greeted the Duchess, and his sister Emily appeared at this time. The girl gracefully curtsied, then began talking non-stop. "I often hear my brother mention you. He says your Majesty is both cute and beautiful, and seeing you today, it's indeed true." Being exposed like this, Enrique was very embarrassed and hurriedly tried to stop his sister's improper behavior. But Mabel just smiled, thanked her, and praised the girl's cuteness. At this time, a servant came to notify them it was time to return. The two hurriedly said goodbye, after the carriage had traveled far. The Duchess asked Mabel if she had any dealings with the Javier family's descendants. After learning they had only met a few times, she earnestly advised, "Regarding the Javier family, you'd better be careful." On the way back, she always tried to avoid eye contact with the Duchess, but was caught just once. "Your Majesty, are you afraid of me?" Mabel gathered her courage and asked that question. "Don't you dislike me?" The Duchess calmly stated she had no reason to dislike her. But even so, Mabel still didn't understand. After all, Oscar not being able to ascend the throne was because of her, and she was the daughter born after the Emperor Emeritus remarried. But this still wasn't a reason for the Duchess to dislike her. She believed Oscar had voluntarily given up the throne, and the Emperor Emeritus remarrying and having children had nothing to do with her. "Even if you think I dislike you, there's no need to fear me, because as a ruler you must be fearless." Mabel knew this was the Duchess's strict form of care, so she smiled and thanked her. Their relationship improved from then on. Meanwhile, Aiden was on a mission, now that Mabel's holy power had greatly increased. Even separated by such a distance, they wouldn't experience any instability. Thinking of this morning when he called Mabel to wake up, and their accidental touch, Aiden felt a strange feeling in his heart. He thought it was because of suddenly contacting too much holy power. Actually, it was his feelings changing for the girl he spent every day with. He arrived at an inconspicuous place. The moment he opened the door, a dagger suddenly flew at him. Needless to say, he caught it effortlessly. The man was a member of the Street Alley intelligence organization, Bell, and Aiden was the organization's nominal leader. The organization had been quietly established 3 years ago, and soon spread throughout all social strata, holding an unimaginable amount of intelligence. Today, Aiden came as usual to integrate intelligence, and who could imagine that the organization's actual leader was the 5-year-old Emperor Mabel, although she could communicate with all animals in the world. Once exposed, she could easily be exploited by those with ill intentions, and as an emperor, her movements were very restricted. so she needed an intelligence center. Thus Belle was established. After verification, Baron Milk's subordinates frequently entered and exited areas near the Devlin border. The specific reason was still under investigation, and the old fox Javier had been behaving himself lately, but rumor had it he had his eye on a gold mine. Mabel had already thought of a countermeasure, just waiting for Javier to show his fox's tail. After all, this was the price he should pay. Today was the rumored founding celebration. The old fox's daughter attracted the attention of everyone present. Ladies praised her proper behavior. Noble girls envied her exquisite clothing, and flattered her for having a brother who doted on her, and even for playing with the cold imperial prince. She was simply the star of this celebration. Emily happily accepted these compliments. But before she could respond, the true star of the founding celebration arrived. With the announcement, "The Emperor has arrived," all eyes focused on Mabel. Everyone exclaimed she was like an angel, as cute as an elf. The crowd was overwhelming, making Mabel very nervous. Then, with the Emperor Emeritus's reminder, after a slight adjustment, she graciously thanked everyone present, wishing them all an enjoyable time. The Emperor Emeritus was very proud of his daughter's performance and decided to give her a reward, anything she wanted. But unexpectedly, Mabel said, "I want you to give me nothing." Such a novel reward left everyone dumbfounded. Mabel knew this was the only way to prevent her father from giving her expensive things. At this time, Duchess Donovan suggested going down to greet everyone. Clearly, everyone was very expectant. Mabel agreed without thinking, and the nobles were all delighted. Time passed. Mabel was tired but still maintained her smile, not wanting to disappoint the Duchess's goodwill. Suddenly, the music changed. Everyone began to dance. The old fox's son Enrique suddenly came forward, smiling as he invited Mabel to dance. The atmosphere was wonderful, but before Mabel could respond, the Emperor Emeritus had already flashed to the front, very seriously preventing it. "No, Mabel, you can't dance with him." After all, the boy in front was not only the old fox's son, but had even blatantly submitted a marriage proposal. Unexpectedly, Enrique was not afraid at all, stating he had invited Mabel, and only if she herself refused would he step back. The Emperor Emeritus immediately became furious. It seemed the 3-year palace ban was too short. So he said with a dark face, "If you want to dance with Mabel, then defeat me first." This was clearly deliberate difficulty. So Enrique dejectedly retreated. Mabel was very angry, directly shouting, "Father Emperor is a fool. Why are you so mean to my friends? You've scared everyone." The Emperor Emeritus was left speechless by his precious daughter. The people present were all in disbelief. They never expected the stern and fearsome Emperor Emeritus would be so speechless. Duchess Donovan behind was quite calm. Because she knew it would turn out this way, the Emperor Emeritus would be jealous with the boy who danced with Mabel. So she had directly skipped teaching her dance lessons. Feeling annoyed, Mabel saw noble girls nearby. Taking the Duchess's suggestion, she went forward to greet her peers. The 3 curtsied nervously, looking cute. Only the Javier family's daughter Emily behaved like an adult. She deliberately acted very familiar, making the noble girls admire and worship her, then naturally invited Mabel to a tea party. But she knew she couldn't casually step into Javier's territory, until Emily mentioned Enrique would also be there. Only then did she hesitantly say she would consider it. After leaving, Emily reverted to her unruly demeanor. Enrique inquired what plans she and their father had, insisting they couldn't harm Mabel. But Emily wouldn't say a word, even exposing Enrique's feelings for Mabel on the spot. When you see the Emperor, your eyes are practically dripping honey. If you want to be the king's consort, shouldn't you fawn like a dog? Despite such insults, Enrique remained very calm. This angered Emily. She believed she was much more excellent than her weak brother Enrique, so the heir should be her. So when their father Javier approached her, asking her to become close to Mabel, Emily had already decided to use every means to prove only she deserved the position of family head. Enrique lowered his head in frustration. The founding celebration ended perfectly. Mabel was quite satisfied with her performance today, not only bravely greeting various families, but also chatting with noble girls her age. The only one she felt bad for was Enrique. She decided to write an apology letter for Oscar to deliver. Just then, Aiden's silhouette appeared outside the window. She rushed out excitedly, happily asking Aiden why he was there. After learning the reason, she hurriedly ran to her bedroom to get something. "This is for you. Open it quickly." It was grapefruit-flavored cookies that Mabel had secretly brought back from the celebration. She had always thought Aiden liked sweets, so whenever she ate something delicious, she wanted him to try it. Seeing the girl's expectant face, Aiden, who disliked sweets, still forced himself to say it was delicious. Suddenly, fireworks lit up the sky, so beautiful that Mabel was mesmerized. Aiden quietly watched her, then picked up the shoeless girl, and they watched the entire fireworks display like this. Delicious snacks, brilliant fireworks, and Aiden beside her. Everything she liked was around her. At this moment, Mabel was too happy for words. The next day, Mabel came to the first library of the palace, wanting to learn about this world through books. And only Aiden knew she could read, so Mabel told others she came to find new picture books. because only those with direct royal bloodlines were allowed to enter. Lysandra was kept outside. This made it more convenient for Mabel to find the books she needed. The place felt like a magical library, organized by book categories. She immediately spotted holy books and philosophy on the shelf. Holy books were the private collection of the temple, which should help with the mysteries about herself. Mabel tried to stand on tiptoe, but still couldn't reach. So she used her power to make the air around her flow. But just as she was about to catch that book, a blonde man grabbed it first. Can you understand this? Mabel had concealed that she could read, so the man said this book was too difficult, then selected a fairy tale book for her. However, just as Mabel was wondering about the man's identity, looking up, she found he had vanished without a trace. Suddenly, Oscar rushed in anxiously. Are you all right? I heard from Uncle that there was a strange person in the library. Mabel hadn't expected the matter to be spread like this, and quickly said she was fine. Oscar looked at the books scattered on the bed and remarked, You've always liked me to read to you since you were little. Do you need me to read for you this time too? Mabel, who could actually read but didn't refuse, she took out The Origin of the World that the man had just recommended. A long, long time ago, a deity appeared with light in the midst of chaos. Taking out a part of its own body, the deity planted many trees throughout the world and named them the Genesis trees. To better nurture these trees, the deity created gardeners, which was the origin of humans. For thousands of years there was peace, until one day, a human coveted the immortality power of the Genesis trees. Later, most of the Genesis trees were devoured by humans. The Genesis trees disappeared from the continent as a result. The deity became furious and cast 7 deadly sins upon humans, then vanished from this land. Thus humans suffered 7 punishments: pride, greed, envy, wrath, as well as lust, avarice, and sloth. Mabel didn't understand what this had to do with her coming here and becoming the seed of God. Nor did she understand why that person had recommended this book. And so the matter was left unresolved, until one day, a new educational priest from the Holy Empire arrived. For 3 years, they had been using the awakening of Mabel as a condition, asking her to acknowledge the Winter surname. After failing, they proposed a new condition, requesting to send their country's priests to participate in education, with only one purpose, which was to trick Mabel to the Holy Empire. But obviously they hadn't succeeded. And the person who came today was appointed by the Holy Emperor himself. So everyone was very nervous, even the divine beast. They tried to find various reasons to accompany her. Mabel believed she could handle it completely. So after failed attempts to refuse, she directly locked them outside. What was unexpected was that the priest who came was the man she had met in the library. You still remember me? I'm truly honored. Mabel felt that the man before her was not simple. His aura seemed familiar, as if she had seen him at the birthday banquet. Then she asked her guests, You wouldn't happen to be the Holy Emperor, would you? The man burst into laughter, and frankly admitted his identity. You don't need to be so vigilant. I won't do anything today. Then what exactly do you want? I had intended to take you back when you knew nothing. But now it seems that's not the case. Mabel's heart suddenly sank. She wanted to pretend she didn't understand. But the Holy Emperor seemed to know everything. On the day you were born, a divine oracle was delivered. But did you know there was unpublished content after the oracle? At the end of the East, a seed to save the world is planted. Red disaster will reduce everything to ashes. At the moment when the world is on the brink of doomsday, the seed of the origin of all things will sprout and rise. The blessing of creation will descend. From these words, it's known that doomsday will come soon. Only Mabel can stop it all. However, she didn't believe in deities at all. Why should I do this? You don't even know when doomsday will come, right? No, the warning of doomsday has begun. The spreading drought is the best proof. Various disasters will follow until doomsday arrives. If disasters are allowed to invade, the entire world will perish, let alone the Ermino Empire. Now only you can save this world. Mabel learned from the Holy Emperor that doomsday was imminent, and immediately felt mixed emotions. Aiden noticed her expression wasn't good, so he spoke up to ask. Unexpectedly, Mabel asked in return, If this world were to disappear, how do you think it would be? To be honest, the former Aiden wouldn't have cared. But now he wanted to stay by Mabel's side forever. Obviously, he had fallen in love, but he didn't understand what this feeling was, so he remained silent. Mabel lowered her head dejectedly, but thinking of her decision to protect her father and Oscar, she still felt she shouldn't give up. Your Majesty, didn't you ask me to investigate Duke Javier? I found some intelligence. Mabel immediately became interested. Have you caught the old fox's weakness? It turned out that at the upcoming auction, a gold mine was about to be auctioned, and Javier seemed determined to get it. In recent days, they had secretly blocked the auction no less than 10 times. This time, they were also prepared to cause trouble. Aiden thought Mabel was going to compete in the bidding, but unexpectedly, the girl smiled mischievously. No, we'll drive the auction price very high and let him buy it. Then have the moles take all the gold so he won't get any. This demeanor made even Aidun back up half a step in fear. Several days later, Javier was enraged again when things were disrupted. Each time it was a man in a black robe causing interference. Who was that person? This time, because there was a reason the golden mine couldn't be taken away. He bought the gold mine at a price dozens of times higher than the market, which was really infuriating. At this point, the butler suggested commissioning the Bell Intelligence Organization to investigate the man in the black robe. Javier immediately adopted this suggestion with an evil smile, but still instructed to hide his identity. However, Mabel soon learned of this news. This was simply asking for trouble. She would take this opportunity to have Casey approach him and gain his trust. Just then, a mole suddenly appeared. It turned out that while mining for gold, it had discovered something magical. Mabel thought it was just an ordinary stone, but the next moment, she recalled that it seemed similar to the holy relic sent from the Holy Empire. That feeling was too painful, so she dared not touch it. She told Aiden her guess. The boy then remembered that the investigation report said, Javier bought the mountain seemingly to look for something. Could it be for... If so, Javier's true intentions would be difficult to fathom. So Mabel decided to find a way to approach Javier's mansion. There must be some unspeakable secret there. Mabel thought of a good method, so she excitedly went to grab Aiden. But unexpectedly, the Emperor Emeritus suddenly appeared, still with the familiar pattern, prying with a sad face. This is your first outing. How could you not go with your father, but with this guy instead? They had been father and daughter for 5 years, so Mabel knew very well how to appease her old father. She said she would go on outings with Dad twice. Sure enough, the Emperor Emeritus immediately beamed with joy. Later, Mabel found Oscar, using the excuse of wanting to get closer to Emily. She expressed her desire to visit Duke Javier's mansion. Oscar instinctively wanted to refuse, but couldn't resist his sister's coquettish behavior, so he agreed to help write a letter. But it's too dangerous to go alone, let me accompany you. Unexpectedly, Mabel immediately declined. No need, I promised to go with Aiden. After saying thanks, she left without looking back, leaving Oscar petrified on the spot. That night, the father and son appeared at Mabel's door. They went in to find she was already sound asleep, after gently covering his daughter with a blanket. The Emperor Emeritus picked up a drawing nearby and examined it, but each one was too abstract, impossible to connect with the investigation plan for Duke Javier's mansion. Another drawing was of the divine beast Mimi, but the two guessed it was Enrique's yellow hair, so they threw it away with disgust. Then Oscar hurriedly tattled. Mabel is actually going to attend the tea party with that boy Aiden. The two instantly deflated. But the Emperor Emeritus still expressed his helplessness. That fellow is under Bellon's spell, he'll kill mindlessly. Only by staying close to Mabel will he remain clear-headed. After reaching an agreement to separate the two safely, they left the room. And Mabel also learned the true reason why the boy had come here. So the next day, she took the initiative to hold Aiden's hand, feeling that such contact might make Aiden feel better. But unexpectedly, the boy suddenly stopped. He even let go. Did this make him unhappy? Unexpectedly, Aiden turned around and held Mabel's hand instead. The atmosphere between them was quite lovely. However, at such times, the Emperor Emeritus would definitely appear, pulling his daughter's hand over in one swoop. Mabel, don't you know we're not going to the meeting room today? Come with Dad. He also turned his head to warn Aiden. Mabel was pulled by her father to a room. When she saw the room below full of ministers, she immediately had a bad feeling. Sure enough, the assistant said the next moment, "We will now begin auctioning the Emperor's collection." Then he made a gesture asking for praise, very confidently. It turned out that several days ago, Mabel had approached him, hoping to auction off things around her that weren't being used, to exchange for some money to help children without water. At that moment, Mabel's status in the assistant's heart rose several levels. She was truly a saint among saints, so he guaranteed that he would sell the items at a high price. Time returns to the present. Mabel was going crazy. How could such things be brought out for auction? She wanted her father to help stop it. But turning around, she found he had already run to the auction seats. Now we officially begin the auction of the Emperor's collection. With a loud announcement, the crowd was boiling. And the first item was Mabel's cat doll. Because it had been played with since childhood, it was a bit tattered. However, the people below were all ready to bid. She thought no one would want such a thing even for 1 gold coin. But unexpectedly, the bids went from 1 gold coin all the way to 1,000. In the end, the Emperor Emeritus directly bid 10,000 gold coins. Sure enough, he took it down directly. The second item was Mabel's drawing of the Imperial Palace courtyard. It was also taken by the Emperor Emeritus for 50,000 gold coins. Then came a wave drum, a cloak, and childhood shoes. The Emperor Emeritus crushed them all with astonishing prices, angering the grandfather who shouted that it wasn't fair. So those present also began to complain. "We also want to bid, Your Majesty, please help us," to raise money from others. Mabel directly announced that the Emperor Emeritus could no longer participate in the bidding, and the scene became much more harmonious. Soon they came to the last auction item. This is a raw stone bracelet made by His Majesty personally. The assistant described it with an extremely exaggerated tone. "This is absolutely unique, a one-of-a-kind handmade work by His Majesty." Everyone began to compete secretly, determined to snatch it as a family heirloom. As the assistant announced the start of bidding, the scene was extremely heated. In the end, it even fetched the astronomical price of 100,000 gold coins. Mabel couldn't help but complain. How does this country even function? Some were happy, some were sad. A minister with a dejected face suddenly strode to Mabel and choked up. Today I wanted to buy one of His Majesty's collections as a family heirloom to pass down to the next generation, but I couldn't get a single one. I feel like I'll regret it if I go back like this, because my lifelong wish is to stroke His Majesty's head once. Immediately the scene caused a commotion. Seeing that the Emperor Emeritus was about to rush over to hit someone, the assistant hurriedly stopped him. Mabel believed that having her head patted in public would affect her authority, so she firmly refused. Just as the man was feeling disappointed, Mabel asked him to extend his hand. Smiling, she said, "We can shake hands like this." Instantly the scene erupted, with everyone rushing towards Mabel. They lined up on their own and shook hands one by one. The Emperor Emeritus was furious. Only he, as the father, had the right to hold hands. So he suddenly said with an evil smile, "From now on, anyone who touches the Emperor must pay a fine." Everyone was dumbfounded, while the Emperor Emeritus looked smug. However, the next second, the minister had already taken out his money bag and excitedly said, "So paying a fine allows us to shake hands with His Majesty? I'll go first. So the hottest auction item of the day became the opportunity to shake hands with His Majesty. The treasury instantly became wealthy. Meanwhile, Enrique was stunned when he received the letter, angrily running to his sister to seek an answer. Will His Majesty really attend today's tea party? After receiving an affirmative answer, Enrique immediately warned her. His Majesty is a good person. Don't cause her trouble. However, Emily showed no fluctuation at all. Instead, she told her brother to recognize his own status. Soon, Mabel arrived at Duke Javier's mansion. Emily, as the host of the party, behaved very properly. This made Mabel sincerely praise her. "I didn't expect you to be able to host such a wonderful tea party now. That's really amazing. Children don't have bad intentions." Emily recalled her brother saying His Majesty was a good person, and unconsciously agreed. And Mabel, looking at this beautiful scene, couldn't help but think in her heart that girls are really too cute. But now it was time to implement the plan. She gave Idun an eye signal, then pretended to sneeze, deliberately spilling the teacup, using the excuse of washing her hands. After refusing Emily's accompaniment, she left with the guard. The first stage of the operation was to divert Lissandro, so Mabel said her favorite little bear ring was lost, looking as if she was about to cry. Seeing this, Lissandro immediately agreed to help search, and Idun pointed to a distant bush, indicating there was something shiny there. Sure enough, with their diversion, Lissandro took Idun and went toward the bush. Mabel also managed to act alone as she wished. Now came the second stage, which was to find the mansion's stable. Because the mine was far away, transportation was needed to get there. Maybe the horses know the secret of the gold mine. Mabel successfully found the stable using her abilities, although she failed to get close through conversation. This didn't stump her, after all. She had years of experience feeding animals. She took out many sugar cubes from her bag. Instantly, the horses were all excited, and the intelligence was easily obtained. As expected, Javier was indeed after that stone. He spent a huge sum to buy the gold mine. If they could confirm the origin of the stone, they would know the old fox's conspiracy and tricks. But just then, voices of two men talking came from outside. Mabel panicked instantly. She needed to find a place to hide quickly. Just as she was about to be discovered, a hand pulled her over. And that person was actually Enrique. The boy, with his familiarity with the place, successfully led Mabel out. When he realized he was holding His Majesty's hand, he immediately jumped up. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done such a thing without permission. Please forgive me." Mabel didn't take it to heart. She just smiled and said it was fine. However, Enrique was puzzled. Why would His Majesty come here? It seemed like you were talking to someone just now. Mabel could only lie, saying the mansion was so beautiful that she got lost while wandering around. However, Enrique seemed to want to ask something more. Idun suddenly appeared. "His Majesty is feeling troubled, can't you tell?" The first and second male leads finally met officially. As soon as they appeared, there was a strong gunpowder smell. "You're the demon of Dubring. Too bad I've long thrown away that nickname. Is that so? Can it really be thrown away?" The atmosphere between the two was tense. Mabel felt like she was almost becoming a sandwich cookie. However, Idun directly told Enrique to get lost. But this was clearly Enrique's territory. Mabel hurriedly stated, "If anyone is leaving, it's us," to prevent the two from fighting. Mabel immediately said goodbye to Enrique, turned around and pulled Idun back to the tea party. Along the way, she earnestly persuaded him, hoping Idun wouldn't be like today again. After all, Enrique is my friend. However, just as the two stepped into the courtyard, from a distance they heard Miss Mitterrand discussing Idun. How can the dog of Dubring attend a tea party and become the Emperor's guard? Isn't that ridiculous? Mabel immediately turned to check on Idun, worried that he would be hurt by these words. But the boy showed no ripples at all, because he had heard too much, so he was used to it. Mabel's heart unconsciously twitched. She walked straight up and said, "What interesting thing are you talking about?" Tell me too. Miss Mitteron lied without blushing, or her heart racing, saying they were just chatting about fashionable headbands. Is that so? How strange. Our Aiden is not a headband. Impure bloodline, no qualifications. Are you insulting my hearing? Emily noticed the atmosphere was wrong. She hurried over to inquire about the situation. Mabel immediately took her leave with Emily. Miss Mitteron says Aiden doesn't deserve to be here. A minister's flaw is my flaw, so I don't deserve to stay here either. Mitteron wanted to defend herself, but was sternly interrupted by Emily. Apologized to His Majesty and Aidun immediately. Miss Mitteron then reluctantly bowed her head, obviously not sincere. After saying goodbye to Emily, Mabel took Aiden onto the carriage back. Although the boy always acted very calm, Mabel couldn't swallow this anger. Last time she heard that Count Mitteron was very close to the old fox and operated illegal large entertainment venues and auction houses. So she decided to start with Count Mitteron. It looks like our organization will soon become wealthy. Through investigation, it was found that Count Mitteron and the old fox were in cahoots, selling fakes, transferring money, and splitting the spoils. In other words, catching Mitteron would be equivalent to cutting off the old fox's funding chain. The next day, Mabel arrived at the Count's mansion. The Count and his wife had heard about their daughter's actions. Although they didn't think there was anything wrong, out of respect for the little emperor, they still asked her to apologize to the despised Aiden. Mabel didn't waste any more time, and walked straight in. It was visible that the Count's mansion was quite grand in scale. This made Mabel very satisfied. Perfect to take over as the organization's office. So she turned to Aidun and said, "Now you can go get the prepared items." Soon a disheveled man appeared, crying and shouting to see Emperor Mabel. Mitteron's face instantly darkened. He hurriedly asked the guards to take the man away. But Mabel suddenly stopped them. "Wait, I'd like to hear what he has to say." The man was called Hansen and worked at the entertainment venue operated by Count Mitteron. He appeared here to report the Count's wrongdoings. That entertainment venue seemed legally operated on the surface, but in fact falsified results and accepted bribes. And he was the one who made the fake account books. Mitteron knew things were going badly and wanted to stop the man from saying more, but was reprimanded on the spot. "Are you trying to disobey His Majesty's will?" Under Lysandro's absolute force, Mitteron dared not make a sound. It turned out that Hansen wanted to resign and no longer do such unconscionable things. But how could Mitteron possibly allow it? He took Hansen's family as hostages. With no alternative, Hansen brought the matter to Mabel. Mitteron still wanted to fight back. But the man took out double accounting books from his pocket, a thick volume sufficient to prove Mitteron's crimes. With that, he was taken away by Lysandro. Mabel was very satisfied with this. Smiling at Aidun, she said, "We really are the best partners." Afterward, the disgraced Mitteron sought help from Javier, but couldn't even get through the door. After all, he no longer had any value to the old fox. Javier thought he could stay uninvolved, but unexpectedly, he couldn't get back the money invested in the entertainment venue. And now was the time for repayment. Suddenly, he remembered the gold mine he bought at a sky-high price. Why was there still no news after so long? But he learned that no matter how deep they dug, no gold was found. The old fox almost spat out a mouthful of old blood in anger. After all, as the head of the Javier family, news of applying for delayed debt repayment would tarnish the family's reputation. Just then, a person claiming to be Casey arrived. The old fox immediately beamed with joy, as if he had caught some life-saving straw. But little did he know it would be his downfall. Bell Intelligence's Casey had been arranged by Mabel to approach the old fox, and gained his trust by selling information. Now was a time when funds were urgently needed. Casey choosing to visit at this time was a good opportunity to make him fall into the trap. So Casey lied, claiming that Mitteron had previously told others that Javier had invested a huge amount of money in the auction house. Now that other investors had lost big, they might come to make trouble for him. "But don't worry, sir. Don't you still have me?" Casey revealed he was from Bell Intelligence. The old fox immediately believed the truth of what he said. "You must be in need of money now. Bell provides funds for those in urgent need. I think we should be able to help you." The desperate old fox could only honestly sign the IOU. Everything was within Mabel's plan. At this time, the assistant came. As soon as Mabel saw him, she remembered the auction. Her father had spent so much money at the auction. Now he must have become a pauper. So she was still a bit angry. The assistant hurriedly squatted down to coax the child, saying he brought a gift seeking forgiveness. When the gift box was opened, what appeared was a pair of exquisite and cute little shoes. Obviously, Mabel was very satisfied. She expressed her gratitude with a touch of pride. But when she jumped off the sofa, she was dumbfounded on the spot. The shoes actually made a beep 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 squeak sound. Contrary to her was an excited assistant. "It's so cute, these shoes are simply made for your majesty." Daring to make fun of her, this angered Mabel so much she grabbed a shoe and chased after him. For a long time after this, everyone was giving shoes that made sounds, making her very tired. It was all Gustav's fault. Mabel looked very troubled, but Oscar still wanted to see how his sister would look walking in those shoes. Just thinking about it was unbearably cute. Mabel fled in embarrassment when the two were happily playing in the yard. Mabel suddenly saw her father in the distance. She greeted him happily. That appearance, increasingly similar to her mother, made the Emperor Emeritus daze. In a trance, it was as if his wife had never left. But when Mabel asked what was wrong, he returned from the beautiful fantasy. The Emperor Emeritus's eyes suddenly reddened, and he turned to leave dejectedly. The next day, the little emperor was ready to start formal learning. Upon learning the teacher was not an ordinary professor, but the highest authority, the dean, she instantly felt immense pressure and instinctively wanted to refuse. She even said she wanted to learn with Oscar from Lysandro. This excited Lysandro immensely. He shouted directly, "Hooray! Finally out of PMH, people Mabel hates." With that, he happily ran outside, obviously going to show off to others. Meanwhile, Academy Dean France was self-satisfied. He who had been called a genius since childhood, now had become the emperor's teacher. Not only had his annual salary multiplied several times, but also free food, housing, and travel were provided. He believed the little emperor was too young to teach much. Each day, he would just teach one word and easily earn his salary. Although the outside world claimed the emperor was a genius, the man didn't believe a single punctuation mark of it. "Greeting, Emperor. I am the Academy's Dean France." Mabel greeted him very straightforwardly, just said hi, just like treating a peer. However, this immediately caused the man's displeasure, believing he was being looked down upon, so he took the initiative. "Excuse my presumption. I know you are the Supreme Emperor, but I am here in the capacity of your teacher, so please observe the etiquette toward teachers." Although Mabel didn't want to settle this so early, she still obediently addressed him as teacher. However, the next second, France pulled out a prepared fairy tale, obviously treating the girl as an ordinary kid. Mabel immediately raised her hand indicating she wanted to learn something else, but was treated by the man as a naughty child making unreasonable demands. "So what would you like to learn?" Mabel said directly and cleanly. "Content about the flaws of Bordeauxian philosophy as proposed by Agol." The man was instantly dumbfounded. But Mabel didn't give him a chance and mocked. "You wouldn't happen to not know, would you? Oscar read that book when he was very young." France found it incredible. That was a book that only the advanced level of the Academy could understand. So he actually began to reprimand. "Your Majesty, no matter how much you don't want to read fairy tales, you shouldn't lie. The most abominable thing is not stupidity, but mischief." Mabel angrily retorted that she hadn't lied. The atmosphere between the two could be said to be tense. "It seems you haven't learned words but have learned stubbornness. I can memorize words just by looking at them once. You're lying again. If you can memorize by looking once, then I'll grant you one wish." Mabel accepted without even thinking. This made the man very smug. It seemed he would soon realize overnight wealth. But the final result not only made him regret, but also turned him from a favored dean to a slave, unexpectedly in just 1 minute. Mabel wrote it down without missing a word. But Franz hadn't yet realized the seriousness of the situation. He thought a child's wish would just be dolls and ornaments. But Mabel had Aiden bring a piece of paper. And this was not an ordinary paper. It was a blank slave contract taken from Mitterrand's auction house. The man knew but had to sign. After all, Aiden behind Mabel looked like he would take his life if he didn't sign. Mabel was satisfied looking at the name on the paper. After learning the teacher excelled in mathematics, she had some crooked thoughts. Turning to whisper in Aiden's ear, "Let's make the teacher Bell organization's accountant. Give him more money." Now that's great. Instead of being a good dean, he became a slave. The next day, Oscar went to find Mabel as usual. Because he knew Enrique had sent a letter, he was looking forward to writing the reply for Mabel. Just thinking about spending happy letter writing time together made him very excited. But when he pushed open the door, he found his sister already writing with her head down. And it was a reply to Enrique. He felt as if struck by lightning. Dropping the words, "You've gone too far," he turned away dejectedly. The innocent Mabel had no idea what had happened, but her lady-in-waiting and attendant both said it was her fault. "The prince said you were too much for 2 reasons. The first is that the prince has always been looking forward to reading letters to you and writing replies for you. But now you don't need him anymore, so he feels hurt." Mabel truly hadn't thought of it that way. She had always thought she was troubling Oscar. Now that she thought about it, Oscar always seemed happy when helping her write replies. So what's the second issue? It's because the first letter His Majesty personally wrote wasn't to the prince. After all, a first is extraordinarily meaningful, and he was certainly looking forward to receiving it. Mabel knew she had done wrong. She immediately jumped off her chair to go comfort Oscar, but she couldn't find him for many days. He was clearly hiding on purpose. Now things were completely ruined. Mabel prepared to buy a meaningful gift, hoping Oscar would calm down after receiving it. However, after shopping for a long time, she still didn't know what to buy. She suddenly felt a bit dejected. "I'm such a terrible sister. I don't even know what Oscar likes." Her lady-in-waiting comforted her, saying the prince would like anything from her. But Mabel didn't want that. She only wanted to give Oscar something he truly liked. Just then, a sharp slapping sound suddenly came from behind. Instantly triggering memories Mabel had gradually forgotten. The sound of the little emperor being slapped frightened her into a daze. To her, it was a sound so terrifying she wanted to cover her ears. It was also the sound that she, as Gyo-yoon, wanted to escape from but never could in her childhood. Mabel was lost in memories she couldn't shake, until Aedun noticed something was wrong, which brought her back to reality. She always had a feeling that seeing Aedun made her feel very secure. She reassured herself it was okay. Now she had real family. Those were all things of the past. So she strode toward the source of the sound, wanting to see who was being so violent. But she never expected the one being hit was Enrique. It turned out that 3 hours earlier, Duke Javier had extraordinarily taken Enrique to a clothing store to buy new clothes, and even let him wear them out. Enrique was very confused. Hadn't the family's financial situation become so serious they needed to sell their southern villa? Why was father in such a good mood today? Could the problem have been resolved? He was about to ask about the specific situation, but was scolded for walking too slowly. The two walked into a place that looked very high class. Then Javier introduced him to a man and explained the purpose of today's visit. I called you here because there's an interesting business opportunity, but the investment capital is a bit high. The man immediately knew Javier wanted to borrow money but didn't mind at all. Though as they talked, he would occasionally glance at Enrique. The boy felt completely uncomfortable. He really wanted to leave quickly. But unexpectedly, after the two finished talking, Javier told Enrique to stay and chat with the man. Don't be disrespectful to Baron Caliph. The moment he heard the name, Enrique was dumbfounded. Rumor had it that Baron Caliph liked pampered young noble boys, and was even expelled from society because of it. Yet despite knowing this, his father still did this. A strong feeling of disgust welled up inside him. Enrique was utterly disheartened. He never imagined his father would be such trash. Right now, he suddenly missed Mabel very much. I'm sorry, Baron, I don't think I can stay to chat with you, so I'll take my leave. With that, Enrique turned to leave, completely ignoring Javier's roars from behind. The old fox was furious, having finally found such a perfect target, only to have it ruined like this. So he vented on Enrique's face, slap after slap, with no intention of stopping even when his lips started bleeding. But the next second, Javier was sent flying. It turned out that Mabel had suddenly rushed forward to block the slap for the boy, and was instantly sent flying. Then before anyone could react, she covered her injured arm and began crying loudly, repeatedly crying out that it hurt so much. Enrique immediately rushed over to check on her, while others quickly came running at the sound, especially when they saw the Emperor, who had never cried since childhood, now crying so heartbrokenly. They were all shocked. Lysandra quickly stepped forward asking what had happened. Mabel directly sobbed out her accusation. It was Duke Javier, he hit me. Lysandra was furious beyond measure, wanting nothing more than to tear the old fox to pieces on the spot, in order to prove Javier's crime. Mabel was childish for once and told a white lie. Now Lysandro didn't even bother to investigate the truth. He directly imprisoned the man on charges of harming the royal family. Everything happened so quickly that Enrique hadn't even understood what was happening. Before Mabel warmly took his hand to comfort him. There are no bugs now, so don't cry anymore. From this moment on, Mabel became the only ray of light in Enrique's dark life. While Aiden knew Mabel was acting, seeing her injured hand, he still had the urge to eliminate everyone. But he knew he couldn't do that, because Mabel would hate him for it. That night, he brought a medicine box to find Mabel. As soon as he entered, he saw the girl using a pillow to vent her anger at the old fox. He immediately regretted not killing the old fox on the spot. Don't be angry anymore, leave Duke Javier to me to handle. No need, he's already in prison on charges of harming the royal family. But what's that? Aiden immediately started rummaging through the medicine box, which confused Mabel, because until now she hadn't noticed she was injured. This was all within Aidun's expectations. So he took the initiative to come and bandage her wounds. Seeing the boy's serious expression, Mabel smiled with satisfaction. She hadn't expected the cold Aidun to have such a careful and gentle side, but when she saw her hand bandaged like a bear paw, she was stunned. Isn't this a bit excessive? As it turned out, the boy had already thought it all through. It needed to look serious to others. After all, rumors that Her Majesty was severely injured would have a greater impact on the Duke. Mabel was amazed. She never thought Aiden would be even better at deceiving people than herself. When the Emperor Emeritus learned what happened, he was furious. How dare someone lay hands on Mabel? She was his and Sienna's precious daughter. He anxiously pushed open the door when he saw the bandages wrapped around his daughter's hand. Concern and anger overflowed in his eyes. What happened? It must hurt a lot to be injured so badly. Mabel said it hurt a little, but actually it didn't hurt at all. But seeing her father slump dejectedly by the bed, she felt very guilty. She patted his head gently to comfort him. In this moment, the Emperor Emeritus once again saw the shadow of his deceased wife in Mabel. Maybe I'm only like this because I suddenly relaxed. Don't worry, but for Javier to dare harm the Empire's Emperor, I absolutely won't let him off. Leave the rest to Dad, you rest well. After hesitating, Mabel still called out to her father as he was about to leave. After the Duke is punished and returns home, what will happen to Enrique? She knew the old fox was high-ranking and influential, unlike Count Mitterrand, who could be stripped of his title. By then, Enrique would certainly suffer even more severe abuse. Don't think too much. Dad will arrange everything. After the Emperor Emeritus left the room, Mabel began to overthink. Dad looked strange just now, like something was wrong. She decided that after this was over, she would spend more time with her dad and Oscar. Suddenly, she sat up. She remembered she hadn't prepared Oscar's gift yet. So she immediately got out of bed, planning to sneak out with Aiden. But when she opened the door, she found Oscar outside. "I heard Duke Javier laid hands on you. Are you okay?" Mabel immediately lowered her head and apologized. "I'm sorry, I went out to buy you a gift, but couldn't find anything." "My gift? Why buy me a gift? I made you angry, didn't I? I thought a gift would be more meaningful than a letter. I was wrong. Please don't hate me." The silent Oscar suddenly froze. He crouched down and hugged Mabel tightly. "I don't need a gift. I just felt stupid for being jealous over something like that. That's why I was avoiding you. How could I hate you? You're my only sister." The two finally resolved their misunderstanding at this moment, happily hugging each other. And remembering that the Emperor Emeritus had been acting strangely, Mabel still asked, "Did something happen to Dad? I feel like he seems very tired." The little Emperor was injured because of the old fox, and just thinking about it made the Emperor Emeritus furious. He grabbed his sword and rushed to the dungeon. Staring grimly at Javier on the ground, he said, "Is that the hand you used to hurt my daughter?" The old fox knew the Emperor Emeritus was extremely angry. He could possibly lose his life here. So to avoid provoking the Emperor Emeritus, he tried to explain in what he thought was the gentlest tone. "I really didn't lay hands on Her Majesty. I know you dote on the Emperor, but you can't just listen to her side of the story." The Emperor Emeritus didn't give him any chance to respond and directly called in a witness, his son Enrique. The old fox immediately shouted excitedly, "That's right, my son. He was at the scene and can testify for me." Seeing Enrique's heavily swollen face, even the Emperor Emeritus felt distressed. He never imagined Javier could be so heartless, to hurt such a small child so severely. "Enrique Javier. Mabel said she just wanted to stop Javier from hitting you. Then Javier punched and kicked her. Is this true?" The old fox was truly scared and hurriedly explained that he was disciplining his son. And Her Majesty fell when she suddenly rushed over. "What are you standing there for? Hurry up and tell the truth." At this point, Enrique slowly spoke. It was Father who lost control and injured Her Majesty when she rushed over. "Although Father has committed a serious crime, please consider our family's contributions and give him a lighter punishment." Javier could hardly believe it. He was about to strike Enrique again, but was stopped by the Emperor Emeritus. "I have heard the witness testimony. I declare that from now on you are removed from the council seat. I absolutely forbid you from appearing around Mabel again." Javier objected to this punishment, but the Emperor Emeritus wasn't finished. "Furthermore, you will be under house arrest. From now on you may not leave Javier territory one step." This was clearly no different from exile, but no matter how he protested, the Emperor Emeritus wouldn't even look at him. "Are you satisfied now? Using false testimony to put your tyrannical father under house arrest." What was the truth of the matter? The Emperor Emeritus had always been very clear, because he received real-time reports about Mabel. "You don't mind even if Her Majesty is lying?" "Of course, because it's a kind lie." Only then did Enrique understand. The reason Mabel could be so bright and kind came from the unconditional trust between family members. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but smile, but was inadvertently discovered by the Emperor Emeritus, who immediately warned him. "Enrique Javier, don't be too greedy." Just now, Mabel was checking the recent organizational accounts. She found that under Vice President Casey's leadership, the Bell organization had become so wealthy in such a short time. There was also a very valuable list. After gambling away everything, those nobles who had borrowed money from the Bell organization, she wasn't after money from the beginning, but rather to seize the opportunity to grasp their weaknesses. Now, the more they borrowed, the better. "By the way, is the Franz teacher working hard?" "Yes," although at first he was very dissatisfied. When he heard the salary amount, he was absolutely delighted. Clearly, everything was within Mabel's expectations. Afterward, she confirmed with Aiden that the stone discovered in the old fox's mine at present seemed just an ordinary mineral with no other value. Even though Mabel felt it was very similar to the sacred object from before, she could only let it go. As Mabel was about to leave, Aiden hurriedly asked where she was going. The girl smiled and said, "Though it's a bit late, I want to have tea with Dad. Then I'll go protect you both." "No need, you go rest. With Dad there's no need to worry." Seeing Mabel wouldn't agree, Aiden used the excuse that she was officially claimed to be seriously injured, and got his wish to carry her to the Emperor Emeritus's bedroom. "Is Dad here?" "I only saw Gustav in the office. His Majesty has already retired." Mabel found it very strange. Hasn't Dad been very busy lately? How could he be sleeping so early? Combined with his recent dejected state, the concerned Mabel decided to go in and check. But the Emperor Emeritus didn't allow anyone into his bedroom, at Mabel's insistence. Lysandro also believed the Emperor Emeritus would make an exception for Mabel, so he still let her go in for a look. This was Mabel's first time coming here. Strangely, the entire room was filled with smoke, making one feel uncomfortable all over. She carefully climbed onto a chair, wanting to see if Dad was asleep. However, when her hand touched the Emperor Emeritus, she was suddenly grabbed, and a sharp sword was placed against her throat, even cutting a small wound. "Who is it? How dare you enter my chambers?" The next second she froze. "Is it you?" "Siana." When the smoke cleared, he saw it was Mabel. He didn't know what he had just done. He had almost killed his most beloved daughter. And Mabel was terrified too. Scenes of being beaten in her previous life surfaced again. The next second, the Emperor Emeritus embraced her, only then slowly coming to his senses. "I'm sorry, Mabel, I'm sorry." The Emperor Emeritus repeatedly apologized, even lowering his head in pain. Mabel knew her father had his own difficulties. She smiled and stroked his head to comfort him. "I scared you by sneaking in. I'm sorry, it's my fault." At this moment, father and daughter embraced, comforting each other's wounded souls. The next day, the scheduled education time with the priest arrived. Mabel's bandage-wrapped appearance raised the man's curiosity. She touched the place on her neck where her father had cut her and paused, saying it was just an accidental fall. The God King said nothing, using divine power to remove all the bandages. Instantly, all the various wounds, large and small, disappeared. "You must be careful because you cannot heal yourself." Mabel was confused about the real reason. But even the God King didn't know. It just happens sometimes. Originally, Mabel didn't want to seek help from this annoying man. But now, perhaps only he knew the truth. So Mabel took out a bag. After the God King opened it, he was also startled. "I originally wanted to check what this thing was, but couldn't find out. By the way, didn't you give me an identical one before? Is this also a sacred object?" It turned out that what the God King had sent before was processed for immediate absorption. While this was its raw form, precisely the essence of the world tree, also known as moonstones. Most of the world trees in the world have now disappeared, but some of their essence still remains. It is because of them that nature is maintained. But as the essence is destroyed, nature gradually loses the power of the gods. And behind this, someone is deliberately causing destruction. The current manifestation is drought, and eventually the terrible end of the world. Mabel couldn't precisely grasp the word apocalypse yet, but just thinking that this world would disappear made her very sad. She wanted to protect everyone, to protect this hard-won happiness. "What should I do to prevent the end of the world?" The God King smiled with satisfaction. It seemed this little one finally wanted to listen to him. "Find and absorb the essence before it's destroyed. And only you and I can find the essence. But this task falls to you, the owner of the oracle." This made Mabel even more confused. If so, why was Javier accumulating essence? Could he be connected to the drought? Meanwhile, the confined Javier was furious, then slowly took out a black crystal ball from the drawer. Soon, the old fox was video chatting with the king of Debrin through the crystal ball. "Duke Javier, how many moonstones have you found?" "I found 2. That's terrible. I'm working hard to search, and we'll have good news soon. But I can't leave my territory now, so I would like to seek your majesty's help." Scene change. Mabel has been in a bad mood lately. Her attentive brother noticed her unusual behavior, so he invited her to go to the lake for a picnic to cheer up. Mabel was very happy about this. The two spent a fairly nice picnic time together. But Mabel was very concerned about her father. He's been strange lately, and hasn't come to see her since that time. If it were before, the moment he knew about the outing, he would have followed. Oscar had naturally also noticed his father's change, but still comforted Mabel. "Father has been busy with affairs lately. Once he's done, he'll come see her." Mabel was still very worried. She knew father had become like this because of what happened that day. The Siana that father called out when he was disoriented was someone Mabel knew nothing about, having been carefully looked after by wet nurses and family since childhood. She had never been curious about her mother's absence, but now she wanted to know about her mother. "Oscar, what kind of person was my mother?" "She was a very gentle person. Although I'm not her biological child, she still genuinely worried about me and cared for me. But when I was young and didn't know better, crying and wanting other people's things, I was still severely criticized. She was very gentle, but also very strict when facing mistakes." Seeing Oscar's naturally emerging smile, Mabel was even more curious about what kind of person her mother was. On the other side, learning that Mabel and Oscar had gone on an outing, the Emperor Emeritus deeply regretted that he couldn't accompany her. Suddenly he remembered the last accident. "Lisandro, you shouldn't have let Mabel in that day." Though he said so, he also knew that Lisandro alone couldn't stop Mabel. She was exactly like Siana. Just thinking of Siana stirred complex emotions. Lately, he felt his wife's voice growing more distant, even her appearance less clear. So to see her in his dreams, he had actually used an illusion candle. If Siana knew, she would surely be angry, perhaps not seeing him for a year. All this was overheard by Mabel outside the door. So after composing herself, she pushed the door open, hugging her father and coquettishly asking, "Can I sleep with Dad tonight?" The Emperor Emeritus knew his daughter was worried about him, so he happily agreed. And tonight was the first time Mabel learned about her mother through her father's eyes. The little Emperor realized for the first time how empty this room was when sleeping with her father. She couldn't help but sigh that Dad was really lonely. "When I was little, Dad asked to sleep with me many times. Without exception, I refused every time. I really feel sorry. From now on, we should sleep together often and go on outings together. Soon, the Emperor Emeritus returned after changing clothes. Seeing his daughter's neck had healed, he couldn't help asking, "Does it still hurt?" Mabel smiled and said the education priest had healed it. Now it didn't hurt at all. "Aren't you afraid of me or hate me?" "I am a little afraid, but I don't hate you." The girl smiled innocently. "Because you're my dad!" With that, she flopped down. "We should sleep now, Dad. Hurry and turn off the light and come over." The Emperor Emeritus nervously asked if his daughter wanted anything, whatever it was. Mabel thought for a moment, directly asking for 2 wishes. The first was to lift the ban on entering and leaving the imperial city. She wanted to play with Enrique. The Emperor Emeritus instantly regretted it, but not wanting to leave the image of a liar in his daughter's heart, he could only reluctantly agree. Mabel happily hugged her father's arm, playfully saying she would save the remaining wish. This expression made the Emperor Emeritus dazed, remembering his deceased wife. Even this trait was like Sienna. Hearing her mother's name again, Mabel still couldn't help asking what kind of person she was. Oscar said mother was very gentle and kind. But to the Emperor Emeritus, Sienna was a very ruthless person, making him fall deeply in love, then resolutely leaving. She had pink hair like yours, and amber eyes like Marquess Gardenia. The first time I saw her, she was crawling out from a rosebush, like a forest elf, making me even forget to breathe. After coming out of the bushes, she gently shook off the leaves on her body. When I removed the last leaf, something seemed to be added to my heart. Undeniably, that was the beginning of love. Does Dad miss Mom? Would you still miss her even with Oscar and me by your side? The Emperor Emeritus didn't know how to answer. Unexpectedly, Mabel spoke first. "I miss Mom too, but it's okay because I have Dad and Oscar." At this moment, A.S. finally expressed his longing. "But now I'm very content having you and Oscar with me." But the next second, he received an extremely difficult question. "Then does Dad like Mom more or me more?" "You can't say you like both." Mabel hugged her father tightly, saying she liked Dad the most. The Emperor Emeritus's lonely heart was healed, and he sincerely responded to his daughter. "Of course I like adorable Mabel the most. The days without his wife would still be very painful. But because he wasn't alone, he could endure." "Sienna, when we meet again, I hope you can praise me with your beautiful voice, saying you did well." Seasons come and go. 5 years quickly passed. The prince, who was once the heir to the emperor, had become the youngest knight. Before they knew it, the Imperial Guard knight appointment ceremony had arrived. Usually not many people would attend, but this year countless nobles came, because this time appeared the youngest knight in history, the emperor's only brother Oscar. Everyone marveled at his talent. Nobles with daughters of suitable age paid special attention, all wanting to establish a connection with him. But over the years, Oscar had never changed dance partners, because only Mabel could stand by his side. Soon the boring ceremony began. This was Mabel's first year presiding. She had already decided that next time the ceremony must be shortened. After a long while, it was finally her turn. Oscar looked at her, unconsciously breaking into a brilliant smile, enchanting the noble young ladies at the scene. "I heard he's one of the Empire's 4 heavenly kings. Besides him, there's also Enrique, Adun, and Mabel." This left Mabel very puzzled, unable to understand today's children's thoughts. Soon came the loyalty oath ceremony. The guard brought over a box. Inside was a gleaming sharp sword. Mabel quietly infused it with divine power, while the knights came forward in order to swear their oaths. The most eye-catching among them was Oscar. Everyone called him a genius, but only Mabel knew the bone-deep effort behind that title. "I swear on my honor, my sword shall only face my lord's enemies. My shield shall only protect my lord. I offer my life for my lord alone." Normally, knights would swear in the name of God, but Oscar swore on his own honor instead. This surprised everyone present, but Mabel thought this suited his style perfectly, and so Oscar became a knight at such a young age. The Emperor Emeritus, who would also give his life for Mabel, was quite pleased with Oscar's modified oath, and felt that staking one's life was only natural. Suddenly, he asked about Adun's whereabouts, to prevent the two from noticing anything suspicious. Mabel lied that he went to buy her delicious sweets. The head chef, who happened to be passing by with a tray, instantly deflated. So the father and son duo considered replacing the chef. Mabel quickly smoothed things over, claiming the palace food was the best. She just occasionally wanted to try street food, since such things weren't available in the palace. The Emperor Emeritus then remembered his daughter had never gone out to explore the city, so he decided on the spot to have an impromptu trip. But once they reached the streets, Mabel regretted it. The young emperor, experiencing his first family outing, looked around excitedly everywhere, unexpectedly enjoying the leisure of strolling without guards or attendants. Although they had disguised themselves to avoid attention, it was obvious that dad and brother, with their outstanding good looks, were impossible to hide. Nevertheless, Mabel didn't give up on the idea of having fun. However, things quickly became awkward. She merely commented that a book looked nice, and her father immediately rushed to the shopkeeper, buying every book on the stall, no matter how she tried to dissuade him. And when she accidentally bumped into someone, Oscar anxiously rushed forward, with a gloomy face issuing a warning, "Come any closer and I'll take your life." Their overreactions left Mabel utterly speechless. So when the three arrived at a tavern afterward, Mabel began to lecture them. How could Dad spend money so recklessly? How could Oscar threaten people so casually? The two wanted to argue back but were silenced by Mabel. They could only hang their heads and admit their mistakes. "If you keep acting like this, I won't come out with you anymore." Just then, the voices of some drunkards could be heard nearby. "Even in this state, the country somehow still functions. I thought it would collapse by now. Letting an ignorant child sit on the throne to handle state affairs. Looks like the end of the world is truly coming." Mabel nodded repeatedly as she listened from behind, sighing that there were still some sensible people in this world. She perked up her ears, wanting to hear more of these correct observations. But obviously the large and small figures beside her wouldn't let her wish come true. So she first asked the two to put away their swords, and seeing they weren't convinced, Mabel began to sweet-talk them. "We're commoners now. If our true identities are discovered, it would be troublesome. Besides, those words can't hurt me at all, because I have Dad and Oscar by my side." With just a few sentences, she moved the bristling two to tears. Just as Mabel was about to lead the two away, the man who had been speaking was grabbed. Another man in a black robe appeared, demanding to know what nonsense they were talking about. Looking carefully, Mabel was shocked to discover it was Adun. What was he doing here? As it happened, when the drunk criticized the Emperor as a child, Adun, returning from his errand, overheard. Unable to let anyone speak ill of Mabel, he stepped forward and lifted the man up. From beside came the Emperor Emeritus's questioning voice. "Adun, why are you here?" The boy, caught red-handed, shrank back involuntarily, but saw the small figure behind the Emperor Emeritus, clearly signaling him to quickly return to the palace. So Adun turned to leave without looking back, but was stopped by the Emperor Emeritus. "Stop! This doesn't look like a sweet shop, does it?" Mabel hurriedly stepped between them to explain. "He must have passed by here on his way to the sweet shop, right?" The boy immediately agreed, though the tension between the two remained palpable. All right, go buy the sweets, and don't forget what I told you." Just when Mabel thought she had gotten away with it, Casey, the vice chairman of the organization, approached Adun and asked, "Chairman, who are these people?" Mabel inwardly cried out, "Not good." If Dad found out she had created the Bell organization, not only would everything be confiscated, she would be monitored daily and trapped in the palace. This absolutely could not happen. So she used her tried and true method, clutching her head and shouting, "My head hurts so much it feels like it's about to split open." Seeing she had successfully drawn their attention, she stated she needed to go home and lie down immediately to feel better. So the two, ignoring the gazes of everyone present, hurriedly took Mabel away from there, and Adun couldn't help but think to himself, Mabel's acting skills seemed to have improved quite a bit. The vice chairman watched this scene with abundant curiosity. What kind of people could possibly know the chairman's name, and make the usually cold and aloof chairman so obedient? Casey was very curious, so ignoring Adun's warning not to investigate Mabel, he directly ordered his subordinates to follow them. But no matter how they looked at it, it was just an ordinary carriage. So the man decided to approach for a closer look. Unexpectedly, he was ambushed the next second. It was Oscar who had detected the movement. "Who ordered you to follow that carriage? If you don't talk, your life is forfeit." The man knew he was serious and hurriedly explained he belonged to the Bell Intelligence Organization. He was just following orders to check things out, with no intention of harming anyone. Oscar naturally continued to ask who gave the order, but the man suggested Oscar to commission Bell to investigate who ordered him to track Mabel. Such a roundabout approach was difficult to comprehend, and Oscar surprisingly let the man leave. When he learns that the Empire's largest organization was established by his sister, who knows how he'll react? Meanwhile, the man who had fled in panic reported the situation to the vice chairman. But far from discouraging Casey, it only made him more curious. Such strong abilities and knowing the chairman, it's simply too mysterious. So he resolved to discover their identities, as well as the true person behind the chairman. At this moment, the behind-the-scenes chairman, Mabel, had returned to the palace. Adun apologized for what happened during the day, but Mabel didn't take it to heart. Besides, such a thing wouldn't happen again, because going out with those two was simply too exhausting. By the way, how's the investigation going? After investigation, Adun discovered that Balan frequently traveled within the Imperial City, clearly planning something. Over the past 4 years, the Bell organization had become the strongest guild on the continent. Adun adopted the identity of Ethan as its chairman, while Mabel hid her identity behind the scenes, cutting off connections between the organization and the palace. Then mobilized the organization to monitor and investigate the Devlin Empire. After tireless efforts, they uncovered Balan's two objectives. The first was to avenge his severed arm against Emperor Emeritus Aes, and the other was to obtain the ability to live forever. Hearing such a reason for the first time, Mabel was speechless to do so much for such a ridiculous motive. Therefore, she worked overtime every day, yet still didn't dare to relax. After all, enemies would act even while she rested. By the way, how are things at the guild? Are the teacher and Casey working hard? The answer was definitely yes, because Mabel gave them far too much. She understood clearly that for working people, Nothing matters more than money. Then Aiden produced a list of nobles, all secretly meeting with the old fox, clearly plotting a comeback. Mabel wasn't concerned. With a wave of her small hand, she ordered Aiden to round them all up. But the next moment, Aiden abruptly extended his hand, reminding Mabel it was time for bed, clearly treating her like a child. Even though Mabel insisted she had grown up, Aiden remained firm. Unable to argue with him, Mabel said no more, and so the two bid each other good night. Meanwhile, Bellon was listening to his subordinate's report. He immediately guessed from the alias that Aiden was the chairman of the Bell organization, so he promptly asked if there were any high-ranking members within the organization who could be bought. After screening, they tentatively identified the commoner Casey from humble origins, and the forcibly employed France. First approach, this person called Casey. Aiden, this time I'll let you taste what it feels like to be backstabbed by your trusted aide. The scene returns to the Ermino Empire, where recently the social circles have been in turmoil. Viscount Langut lost his business and fled overnight. Earl Wefferin's bank faces bankruptcy. And behind all this manipulation was the young emperor. But this was just an appetizer. After all, these people had intended to help the old fox Javier. This was their punishment. Today Mabel received another letter from the Holy Emperor. What should have been a discussion of serious matters unexpectedly revealed only jealousy. It turned out the Emperor Emeritus demanded that the education priest sent from the Holy Nation be changed every 6 months. So the Holy Emperor, disguised as an education priest, was forced to return to the Holy Nation. Over these 4 years, the two frequently exchanged letters, their relationship unconsciously growing closer. And to prevent doomsday, the two reached an agreement. Mabel would find the essence and send it to the temple, and the Holy Emperor would purify and safeguard it. Fortunately, the drought situation had improved as a result. Just then, the door was pushed open. The lady-in-waiting Larima rushed in, indicating the guest had arrived at the palace and was waiting. Mabel immediately rose and walked toward the glass greenhouse. After all, she couldn't keep a guest waiting too long. She and Emily had been playmates for 3 months now. To free the siblings from the old fox's control, Mabel had separated their residences, and to prevent them from being harassed or suppressed, she took the initiative to become Emily's playmate, warning those restless individuals through this gesture. Fortunately, her interactions with Emily were going well, better than she had imagined. At this moment, Emily brought up the swordsmanship tournament. Anyone skilled in martial arts could participate, though most were young knights showcasing their abilities. In the past, Mabel had been restricted by the Emperor Emeritus due to her young age. This year, she could finally watch properly. Emily was very curious about who would ultimately triumph. After all, it not only brought immense honor to one's family, but also an opportunity to have a wish granted. Mabel feigned indifference. Oh, a wish? With whom? With your majesty, of course. Mabel was shocked. The dupe is actually me. Why did no one tell me about such an important matter? Soon, news of the young emperor attending the swordsmanship tournament spread throughout the streets, thinking they could see the legendary emperor this year. Most people felt quite happy, and they began to speculate what wish the winner would make. Just then, a drunkard suddenly declared they would definitely propose marriage to the emperor, thus crossing class boundaries and changing their fate. And so a joke that began in a small tavern spread throughout the continent, and people of all statuses began appearing, wishing to propose to the emperor. Upon hearing the rumor, the Emperor Emeritus was so angry he wanted to cancel the tournament, or eliminate the winner at the end. But that was clearly impossible. So the swordsmanship tournament proceeded as scheduled, with several times the usual number of participants, and a lineup more splendid than ever before. The swordsmanship tournament rocked the empire, while a shadowy figure quietly approached. Casey, the vice chairman of the Bell organization, was being targeted. However, he detected the anomaly from the start. Come out, stop following me. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 cloaked men appeared simultaneously. But from their reactions, they clearly didn't know each other. What amusing fellows. Though being popular with men isn't a good thing. After saying this, he began to analyze. The one on the right with a distinctive gait. You're from Devlin, aren't you? And the one on the left seems to be a first-time encounter. But I'll know more after observing a bit longer. The discovered man hurriedly fled the scene, while the masked man from Devlin stood firmly in place and quickly tossed over a money pouch, filled with heavy gold coins. My master wishes to commission you. Whatever amount you want will be satisfied. Casey weighed the pouch in his hand and said seriously, Can you give me the throne of Devlin if I want it? Seeing the man remain silent, he immediately reverted to his usual playful demeanor. A word or two won't suffice. Let's have a drink. But you're paying. The man was speechless. Meanwhile, another man reported to the Emperor Emeritus about Devlin secretly contacting the Bell organization, but to avoid revealing his true identity, he didn't obtain more intelligence. This made the Emperor Emeritus think the person behind the Bell organization might be Bellon, Emperor of Devlin. Discovered before even starting. Now you know your abilities are insufficient, right? Should you be punished then? Yes, I am willing to accept punishment. The Emperor Emeritus's attitude made Domi very nervous. But what followed was more cruel than imagined. I forbid you from approaching Mabel for 1 month. Domi immediately cried out that this was unacceptable. After all, he worked hard to earn money, just to pay fines and shake hands with the emperor. But no matter how he pleaded, he couldn't change the Emperor Emeritus's decision. Soon Mabel discovered this matter, because recently all her guards were Lysandro. Could something have happened to that blonde knight? Or had he become penniless from too many handshake fines? Just then, Lysandro asked about Adun, whom he hadn't seen for a while. Has he been running errands for you these days? That's really inappropriate. Does running errands take an entire day? Let me teach him a lesson. Mabel immediately refuted and stopped his action. Such a protective stance made Lysandro jealous. You defend him so much, yet are so strict with me. Mabel justified herself. Adun is still young. Naturally, one should be lenient with children. Your Majesty, you are also young. Being called young, Mabel was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Furiously about to give Lysandro a punch. Their playful chase was seen by Oscar from upstairs. Today's sister was still as cheerful and adorable as ever. That someone would propose to marry his perfect sister angered Oscar so much he couldn't help but release a fierce sword aura. This was absolutely intolerable. The annual swordsmanship tournament finally began, expected to be the most intense in Imperial history. In just 1 minute, Enrique secured victory in the first match. The audience instantly ignited with excitement. This time, there were 3 top contenders for victory: Oscar, the Emperor's brother; Enrique, heir to the Javier family; and Adun, the Emperor's personal guard knight. All 3 enjoyed tremendous popularity, and this tournament would certainly bring a new peak. Just then, personal maid Larima suddenly appeared, asking Mabel who she hoped would win. Instantly, everyone's ears perked up, but Mabel didn't know whom to choose. After all 3 worked very hard. However, while she was deeply contemplating, Larima assumed she chose Enrique, since her gaze kept falling on him. Your Majesty, your face is red. It's because I'm hot. Having barely dodged that situation, the Emperor Emeritus became displeased. Do you really hope Enrique will win? Not just the Emperor Emeritus. Even the ministers nearby were paying close attention, like watching a dating show and shipping couples. Mabel was truly caught in a dilemma, so her eyes rolled as she thought of a solution. At times like this, she could only exploit her father. Of course, I hope Dad would win. Although Dad isn't participating, in my heart he's the best. Sure enough, the Emperor Emeritus immediately boasted that such a competition was child's play. Soon came the matches between the winning candidates. Now on stage were Adun and Enrique. The atmosphere reached a new high. Enrique had little confidence in himself. After all, he couldn't manifest sword aura yet. But he didn't want to back down. Only by winning could he stand proudly beside Mabel. However, just such a glance made Adun beside him very jealous. He immediately urged to begin quickly. So Enrique raised his sword and stepped forward, unleashing a white-hot duel, repeatedly beaten back, and repeatedly attacking. Enrique noticed Adun was always on defense. Why don't you attack me? I'm afraid you'll get hurt. Enrique felt goosebumps all over, but in reality, Adun feared Mabel would be upset if he harmed Enrique. During this interval, Enrique realized the huge gap between them, his stamina nearly exhausted, while Adun hadn't even developed irregular breathing. Can't remain passive any longer. The next second, he charged at Adun, using all his strength for a final strike, but still ended in defeat. His neck also slashed with a wound. His expression was dejected. Although he knew he couldn't defeat Adun, he was still angry, not to have caused even a bit of damage, but in fact, Adun's face was also cut, and Enrique had even unleashed sword aura at the end, but obviously he hadn't noticed, and Adun didn't intend to mention it. Seeing both unharmed, Mabel on the platform sighed in relief. Both have such strong swordsmanship, and they're so handsome too. I can understand why those ladies are infatuated, though to her who had transmigrated, they were still just kids. At this point, Mabel called over Lysandro, asking him to go fetch the maid Larima, but actually to implement her plan. A few days before the tournament, Mabel learned people from Devlin approached teacher France, attempting to infiltrate the tournament venue. They had also approached Vice Chairman Casey, but they only had their money drained in exchange for false intelligence. Seeing Mabel's troubled expression, Adun immediately proposed disposing of the Vice Chairman. But Mabel said she trusted him, which made Adun quite jealous inside. Then Mabel sincerely said, "Because he is a subordinate trusted by my most trusted Adun, so I trust him." Adun's lips curved slightly upward, his heart full of joy. As for the teacher, there was even less concern, because he had previously signed a contract. Violation would result in becoming a eunuch at minimum. So Mabel decided to let the teacher pretend to be bought, revealing the entrance to the tournament venue. The day of the tournament arrived. Lysandro followed Mabel's instructions, but spotted an unfamiliar face in the corridor reserved for nobles. Upon seeing the magic bomb in the man's hand, he immediately apprehended him and took him away. Meanwhile, Mabel heard from the sacred beast Kitty that things were progressing very smoothly. Just then, the winner of the first semi-final appeared. The young master of Earl Bartheri's house. Instantly thick killing intent permeated the stands. Someone wanting to marry Mabel had infiltrated. After the match, they would deal with him immediately. Soon, the second semi-final. Also, the match everyone most anticipated began. One was Oscar, the Emperor's brother. The other was Adun, the Emperor's exclusive guard. Both enjoyed tremendous popularity, and both carried the sentiment of protecting Mabel. The struggle erupted. This time, I will protect Mabel. Right from the start, an intense confrontation exploded. The scene filled with billowing smoke as if a massive explosion had occurred. Their scattered sword auras attacked each other, more intense than any previous tournament had ever witnessed. But in their back and forth, one could sense Adun wasn't using his full strength, constantly in a state of easily dodging and defending, because Adun knew, if he used full power, people might vanish on the spot. Seeing Oscar's intense efforts, Adun knew it was all for Mabel. Previously, he hadn't understood how Oscar could relinquish the throne without any reluctance, even sacrificing everything for his sister. But now he not only understood, he too lived a life revolving around one person. In others' eyes, they were surely two foolish boys, but he didn't care about that. Soon, Oscar's body reached its limit, his hands also bloody and mangled from sword aura strikes. Although he knew from the start no one could defeat Adun, he still hoped to fight to the last moment for Mabel, with a fierce strike falling. The referee announced the winner of this exciting match was Adun. Oscar immediately wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, fearing his sister would worry. But obviously it was too late. Adun, you'd better keep your promise to wish for Mabel's sake. Moreover, the winner of the previous semi-final was truly unworthy. Both agreed such a person wasn't fit to approach Mabel. At this moment, Adun suddenly curiously asked Oscar what wish he would have made if he had won. Surprisingly, it was for Mabel never to marry, and to live happily with him forever. Seeing the siblings so close, Adun knew his greedy desires for Mabel would be almost impossible to fulfill. As the venue was damaged, the final would continue after cleanup. On the platform, Mabel treated Oscar's wounds, while giving him a lecture on love. But below came discordant voices, saying Adun was unnaturally strong, that rumor about him being a monster must be true. This infuriated Mabel. Since the winner would definitely be Adun, she would hold a grand ceremony for him, let everyone know how gentle and excellent he was. However, things never go as planned. Adun unexpectedly left midway and lost the match. Just as the final match of the tournament officially began, the strongest guard Adun versus the cowardly Earl Bartheri, anyone would know who the winner would be. This also put Mabel at ease on the platform, since she didn't have to worry about Adun getting hurt. However, just as the match began, the venue became very noisy. Clearly, someone had launched an attack. After a sudden explosion, the scene descended into chaos. Mabel found it very strange. The invaders from the enemy country had all been dealt with. How could such a thing still happen? The next second, a light bomb flew straight at her, though such a level could be blocked with just a bit of holy power. But before she could react, Adun from the field had already appeared, blocking the explosion behind him. "Your Majesty, are you all right?" There are Devlin mages nearby, but it seems they fled after throwing the bombs. The two remained very close, concerned for each other. The sister-protecting maniac immediately couldn't sit still, ordering Adun to release his sister. Someone has already gone after the culprits. But in this situation, it's difficult to continue the match, so let's terminate it for now. Mabel had some concerns. Terminating now would cause anxiety among the spectators, playing right into Belon's trap. But she had a plan in mind. By displaying an even more shocking scene, she could make them forget about the attack. So Mabel announced the winner was Earl Bartheri, and personally handed over the crown. But the man's greasy appearance shocked her greatly. She tossed the crown and quickly fled. "So what is your wish?" "My wish is to marry your Majesty." No matter how hard he tried, he simply couldn't get out the last word, as if his throat was being squeezed. It was the doing of the Emperor Emeritus and his son. Mabel found it strange, but didn't discover the truth. The man still persisted in his idea of instant elevation. But before he could speak, he encountered Adun's death stare. He completely fell apart, no longer daring to continue. He could only say his wish was to become wealthy. And so the swordsmanship tournament concluded. Next came the closing work. Mabel stood in the center, opening her arms to unleash divine power. Instantly, the entire venue was sprinkled with twinkling lights. All injuries, large and small, disappeared in an instant. It was truly a miracle. From then on, no one mentioned the attack again. Only the miracle performed by the young emperor spread far and wide. And the protagonist of the miracle paid the price for it.